American TV series, starting to profit from young Sheldon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126, Dungeons and Dragons. After another night of fighting, Mike looked at the messy scene at Katie's house and suggested to clean up the house with the girl. The places where the two fought this week were not limited to a certain room. If Katie's parents, who returned, saw the current scene at home, it would be bad. You know, as a field researcher, Katie's father has the right to be equipped with high lethal weapons. So, for the sake of everyone's physical and mental health, in the morning, Mike and Katie did a thorough cleaning of the house, and at the same time, erased all traces of the two people's fight. At noon, Mike looked at the brand new house, said goodbye to the girl with satisfaction and left. According to the news sent back by Katie's parents, they will be back at noon today. Sure enough, not long after Mike left, a jeep stopped at the door of Katie's house. Katie's parents, Chip Holland and Anna Gast, who were covered in dust, got out of the car. As soon as they entered the house, Katie's mother Anna asked, "Katie, what did you do wrong at school? Why did the school call us?" The reason why Katie's parents rushed back so quickly was because they received the call from the school. Although the other party on the phone did not directly explain what Katie had done wrong, but from the other party's tone, Anna guessed that her daughter had made a big mistake this time. Anna felt guilty for letting her daughter grow up in a remote place like Africa. If her daughter became a bad girl because of her negligence, she would feel even more heartbroken. It can be said that Anna wanted to be a qualified mother, but her sudden concern was a bit inappropriate. Originally, Katie's mood had eased after Mike's counseling last night. As a result, facing her mother's questioning, she remembered the mistakes she had made to teacher Sharon. Looking at her mother's stern expression, Katie didn't know whether she should confess what she had done. She knew that, if she told the truth, it would only make her mother more disappointed. Seeing her daughter's hesitation, Anna's mood also became inexplicably irritated. Just when she wanted to continue questioning her daughter, she was stopped by her husband. "Okay, Anna. Our daughter has grown up and should have her own ideas." Chip comforted his wife. Then, in order to prove that his daughter had grown up, he walked to the cabinet beside him, wiped it, and said, "Look, we were away for a week, and our daughter took good care of the house." The cabinet had just been wiped by Mike and Katie, and it was naturally very clean now. Seeing the clean and tidy appearance of the house, Anna's mood really eased. "Okay." Anna, who had calmed down, looked at her daughter and asked, "Can you guarantee that you can handle the school matters?" "I can." Katie nodded affirmatively. On the other side, Mike also came to Cooper's house before lunch. "Oh, look who's back." Grandma Connie stood up and gave Mike a hug, whispering, "How have you been these days?" Although Mike called Grandma Connie every day during the week he was away, she was still very worried. "I'm fine," Mike replied with a smile. At this time, Mary also came out of the kitchen. "Mike, you are back at the right time. Get ready and we can have dinner." After that, Sheldon and George also came out of their rooms. When they saw Mike, they also expressed their welcome. Especially Sheldon. He also thanked Mike for helping him solve the trouble of Kemet. On Mike's side, he also unexpectedly found Dan's figure at Cooper's house. Seeing Mike's eyes looking over, Dan stepped forward and greeted him stiffly. "Mike, you know, Dan brought a very interesting game. We can play together in the afternoon." Little Sheldon's timely speech helped Dan ease the embarrassment. "Really? I'm looking forward to it," Mike said with a smile. After everyone in the room gathered, they walked to the dining table together. As for the head of the family, George, he was working in the sporting goods store in town at this time and couldn't get away at noon. And the little sweetheart Missy went to the Herschel family next door to play with Barbie. It seems that she will not be back at noon. At the dining table, after everyone sat down, Grandma Connie looked at Mike's face seriously and said, "Mike, have you lost weight recently?" Hearing Grandma Connie's concerned words, Mike was a little speechless. You know, he has the characteristics of Moonlight, and his physical fitness has been improving, and there is no possibility of being thin. However, He also understands Grandma Connie's mentality. Just like when a child comes back from home after a period of time, parents always think that the child has suffered outside, and thin is just an adjective. Just when Mike was about to make a few excuses, he heard Grandma Connie say, "If I had known you would come back today, I would have taken out the beef prepared at home and given you a tonic. That's a good thing I prepared specially for you." As she spoke, Grandma Connie's tone became unserious. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book forum. Others may not know what Mike has been doing these days, but Grandma Connie knows it clearly. "No, I don't need that kind of thing." Mike shook his head and declined. "Let's give it to someone who needs it." "Well, George is lucky." Grandma Connie glanced at Mary and said with a smile. Little Sheldon, who was confused by what he heard, raised his little hand and said, "What special effects does the cow have? Why do you have to explain it separately to George?" Hearing the ignorant speech of her youngest son, Mary exclaimed and interrupted the other party's speech. "Shelley, you are still young. These things are not your concern." After stopping her youngest son, Mary also glared at Grandma Connie implicitly, as if blaming her for talking nonsense. At the table, perhaps little Sheldon did not understand the previous conversation, but little George and Anne, who understood the connotation, looked at Mike with envy. However, after seeing Mike's handsome appearance, the two seemed to be hit again, and silently lowered their heads at the same time. "Okay, let's start the prayer before the meal." Mary clapped her hands, breaking the gradually awkward atmosphere at the scene. After a hearty lunch, Sheldon took out the board game Dungeons and Dragons and played it with Mike, Dan and George in the living room. Bored Mary also pulled Grandma Connie to watch the game. Dungeons and Dragons is an adventure board game with a grand background. The characters can be divided into 3 camps: the evil camp, the neutral camp, and the justice camp. It must be said that this game is made very carefully, and the characters on each card are very realistic. "I want to be the big boss." Sheldon took the devil card first. Looking at the abominable devil character image on the card, Mary, a Christian, felt a little uncomfortable. "You choose first." Seeing that the big boss card was taken away, Mike had no objection. "I choose the brave. I choose the elf hunter." George and Anne relied on their senses to pick 2 cards with handsome characters. "Then I'll go for the dragon." Mike took a dragon card that was spewing flames at random. Chapter 127 Games. The game mode is very complicated and often requires a host to introduce the background of the story and then help the players to go on a grand fantasy adventure, commonly known as running map. Players can also use dice rolling to determine the development of things and the results of the battle. The dice are also divided into D20, D8, D6, D4, etc., with different faces of dice. As the game progresses, players can also improve their combat effectiveness by killing monsters and upgrading, or pick up equipment dropped by monsters to make themselves stronger. Moreover, each character has its own different skills. For example, the dragon can use fire attacks to hurt the opponent through obstacles. The elf hunter can also cause long-range damage with the bow and arrow in his hand. In general, this is a large-scale online game that does not require programs and codes. Players can complete various fantasy experiences such as killing monsters and upgrading, picking up equipment, and entering dungeons under the introduction of the host. After several rounds of small scene games, George and Dan, as the righteous side, were defeated in the battle between good and evil every time, even though Dan also took care of the role of the host. In fact, the host can increase the difficulty of the game to a certain camp according to personal preferences. For example, in emergencies, increase the combat power or number of monsters. It is obvious that Mike and Sheldon, who are in the evil camp, are not afraid of Dan's difficulties. Great, the devil won again. After exploring several small scenes, Sheldon has put himself into the role. Seeing his role, the devil, once again repelled George's bravery. Sheldon cheered loudly. Looking at her little son's excitement, Mary's brows furrowed deeper and deeper. Finally, after another game, she signaled Mike to talk aside. "Mike, I'm not saying that victory is bad." Mary organized her words and said, "See if you can let George and his team win once." "Why?" Mike just found the fun of the game after several rounds of small wins. "You represent evil. Sorry, Mike, I'm not saying you. I want to say that the righteous side should win, Mary said incoherently. As a believer, Mary can't bear to see the devil win, even in the game. And if possible, Mary doesn't want her little son to participate in such a game as a devil. In her opinion, this would have a bad influence on Sheldon's young mind. However, in Mike's opinion, this is just a game, and it has nothing to do with evil and justice. Mary's reaction now is really too sensitive. Just when Mike wanted to persuade the other party, Grandma Connie, who followed him, also understood the meaning of her daughter's words. She shook her head and said, "Mary, you worry too much. Even if Shelley wins, he will not become a devil. No, Shelley is still too young. He doesn't know what he is doing." Obviously, Mary has not stopped worrying. Seeing Mary's overly excited expression, Mike shook his head slightly and said, "Okay, I know what to do." Mike returned to the living room again and suggested that the players in the game exchange roles. Little Sheldon had no objection to this. The previous few small battles were won too easily, and he also wanted to increase the difficulty of the game for himself. As for Dan, who was very good at observing words and expressions, he had already noticed that Mary's face was not right. He mistakenly thought that the other party didn't want to see everyone playing games here. So, Dan was already thinking about how to leave the Cooper family. He didn't really care about the exchange of roles. Little George, who got the dragon card, is now the most excited person. He wants to use this card character to kill everyone like Mike did before. Thinking of that scene, little George couldn't help but smile. However, soon he couldn't laugh anymore. In the next scene, Mike and little Sheldon, who went to the justice side, tortured the evil camp again and again. In this process, the smile on little George's face slowly shifted to little Sheldon's face. Great, the brave is invincible. Little Sheldon, who got the brave card, fought back the dragon played by little George with difficulty. Helping the justice side gain an advantage made little Sheldon cheer happily. "Okay, it's getting late. I should go back." Dan, who was not in the state for the next few games, took the opportunity to put away the board games he brought. Little Sheldon wanted to play for a while, but when he saw the sky outside the window, he said, "That's a pity. We'll play together next time, when we have time." Little Sheldon had had enough of the game for the whole afternoon, so he didn't keep Dan any longer. Okay, Dan replied insincerely, avoiding Mary's eyes and quickly leaving the Cooper's house. He had decided not to bring the game here to play next time. "What do you think, Mary?" "I said it was just a game," Grandma Connie said to Mary after the game was over. "You know, in the subsequent games, little Sheldon won the victory as a brave man. This proves that he doesn't have too many ideas about the role. The game is just a game." "I'm still not at ease," Mary frowned and said. Although little Sheldon didn't play the role of the devil afterwards, Mary felt a little calmer. A correct version in the 16-9 book bar. However, the cheering look of little Sheldon after winning the victory as a devil was still deeply ingrained in Mary's mind. She even felt that at that moment, an evil force controlled her little son. As soon as this thought came up, Mary felt uneasy. She was still thinking about it until her husband came back in the evening. "George, you know, something terrible happened this afternoon." Taking advantage of the time before dinner, Mary pulled her husband, who had just come back from get off work, aside. Then, she told him everything about little Sheldon in the afternoon. George, who was very tired after a busy day, said perfunctorily after hearing what his wife said, "Mary, your worry is completely unnecessary. Look, isn't Shelley fine now?" At the dining table, little Sheldon sat quietly as usual. Next to him, Missy was enthusiastically leaning on Mike. The little girl hadn't seen Mike for a week, and at this moment she was expressing her concern. "Forget it, you won't understand what I'm saying to you, so I'll find a way myself." Mary thought her husband was not a Christian, so he didn't understand her feelings. She decided that it would be better for her to solve this matter by herself. "Whatever you want." George shook his head and said nothing more. So, after dinner, Mary found a corner and called Pastor Jeff. On the other side, Pastor Jeff's home was holding a candlelight dinner for two. After being encouraged by Grandma Connie, Pastor Jeff bravely caught up with the female traffic police. After some contact, the two found that their personalities and ages were very suitable, so the relationship progressed very quickly. In a romantic atmosphere, the two middle-aged men and women who fell in love entangled all the way from the dining table to the sofa. Just when the two were about to make another breakthrough, Pastor Jeff's phone rang. Never mind it, let's continue. Pastor Jeff was forced to hang up the phone once, but when the middle-aged man and woman came to the critical moment again, the phone rang again. Wait, Pastor Jeff answered the phone with amazing willpower. Chapter 128 Baptism. What, demon? After listening to Mary's story on the phone, Pastor Jeff comforted her. Don't worry, Mary, there is no demon. God will bless you. But Mary on the other side was still worried. She told her guests that little Sheldon was controlled by evil spirits and wanted Pastor Jeff to go to her house to help her youngest son with a holy baptism to drive away the evil breath on him. Well, okay, I'll go over in a while. Pastor Jeff heard the other party's anxiety, thought about it for a while, and agreed to Mary's invitation. Then, he looked at the female traffic police Robin, who looked at him affectionately and said meaningfully, "This may be God's guidance as a Christian. Premarital behavior is not allowed." Pastor Jeff felt that this coincidental call was God's reminder to himself. What happened, Jeff? Robin looked at Jeff, who suddenly lost his interest after answering the phone, and asked, "You know, this is the first time since the two confirmed their relationship that they are ready to do something happy. And before that, it was almost the last step. It's okay." Pastor Jeff looked away guiltily and said, "Robin, you know I'm a pastor, and premarital behavior is not allowed." So, just when Pastor Jeff felt very entangled, he heard Robin say, "Is that so? Then if we get married, will it be okay?" Feeling that the other party did not despise him, Pastor Jeff's eyes lit up. "Of course, there is no requirement for this in the church rules." "That's great," Robin said happily. "Let's get married tomorrow." "Tomorrow is the weekend." "No, tomorrow is too urgent. There is no time to prepare the dress, invitations, wedding room, witnesses, etc. Pastor Jeff can make do with it, but he doesn't want to wrong Robin. You know, although Robin is in her 30s, this is her first marriage. Okay. Robin felt the other party's sincerity and then discussed, "How about next weekend? Maybe it can be next Saturday." Pastor Jeff thought for a while and said ambiguously. So, the wedding date of the two was set. With a clear date, the two were no longer anxious about things between men and women. After Pastor Jeff sent Robin out of the house, he prepared the tools needed for baptism and went to the Cooper family. Then, Jeff, wearing formal pastor clothes, helped Sheldon perform an exorcism baptism, while little Sheldon was confused throughout the whole process. "Shelly, how do you feel?" Mary hurried forward to ask, as soon as the baptism ceremony was over. Little Sheldon, who was baptized inexplicably, certainly felt very bad. And since the last time in the hospital, when little Sheldon prayed devoutly to God, the whole family had food poisoning the next day. For this reason, he no longer has trust in God. "I feel a little cold." Little Sheldon wiped the holy water dripping on his face and said truthfully. Seeing that her youngest son did not seem to be inspired by God, Mary turned to look at Pastor Jeff beside him, as if asking him for a solution. At this time, Pastor Jeff certainly couldn't explain it, so he suggested, "How about letting Sheldon attend the weekend class at the church? This may help him." Every weekend after the church service, Pastor Jeff would give a small class on faith to the children in the town. Most of the children who stayed to listen to the lectures were those whose adults believed in Christianity, and they also hoped that their children would believe in God like themselves. In response, little Sheldon expressed great resistance. He refused and said, "I don't want to go to the church class last weekend. It's a waste of time. I would rather learn more scientific knowledge at home." Hearing little Sheldon talking about science again, Pastor Jeff seemed to have grasped the key point. You know, the reason why he lost to little Sheldon in the last debate was because the other party showed scientific evidence. Therefore, Pastor Jeff, who had some understanding of scientific theories in private, said, "Very good, little Sheldon. Since you talked about science, you should know that you have no right to speak before you fully understand something. So, if you don't want to believe in God, you should make a conclusion after understanding him." Pastor Jeff said what he had prepared long ago in one breath. At this moment, he felt very comfortable. Sure enough, after hearing Pastor Jeff's paradox about science, little Sheldon fell silent. After thinking for a while, little Sheldon, who still felt that he could not refute the other party, walked towards his room in disappointment. So far, in the battle of faith between little Sheldon and Pastor Jeff has won back a city. In a good mood, he shouted to the back of little Sheldon, "Sheldon, I will wait for you in the small classroom tomorrow." Pastor Jeff, who won the victory, was not happy for long before he saw Mary and others staring at him with strange eyes. You know, in the eyes of others, it is not very glorious for an adult to bully a child. Apparently, Pastor Jeff also realized this very quickly. After he coughed awkwardly, he said, "Goodbye, my mission has been completed, so I will leave first. I'll see you off." Although Mary also felt that Pastor Jeff's previous behavior of bullying her youngest son was a bit excessive, the result was good. So, she still politely sent him to the door of his house. A perfect version of the book in 16:9. Pastor Jeff, who walked out of the door, suddenly thought of his wedding. He felt that it might be a good choice to give this job to Mary. Looking at Pastor Jeff's eyes, Mary asked tentatively, "Is there anything else?" "There is an important matter that I need to ask you." Pastor Jeff told Mary about his wedding and asked for help. Hearing that it was about the wedding, Mary congratulated the other party first and then took the task readily. On the other side, at Cooper's house, little Sheldon waited for Pastor Jeff to leave and then hurried out again. "Little Pancake, are you okay?" Grandma Connie looked at the other party's tense little face and asked with concern. "Jeff is right. I have to understand the church first before I can have a say." Little Sheldon was unwilling to fail, and he decided to compete with the other party in tomorrow's small class. This time, little Sheldon came out again, just to learn something about faith from everyone. "I have a friend who is Jewish. Maybe you can talk to him." After understanding little Sheldon's needs, Grandma Connie enthusiastically gave him advice. Ella, who is in his 70s, owns a furniture store and is now one of Grandma Connie's suitors. The call was connected, and Ella, who knew Grandma Connie's intention, introduced all the matters of Judaism to little Sheldon without reservation. Finally, he also implicitly stated that, if he did not leave Texas, it would be better to believe in the Christian church. After hanging up the phone, little Sheldon pondered for a while and asked for help from everyone again. He felt that the more churches he knew, the more he had a say. Seeing this, Mike briefly told little Sheldon what he knew about Buddhism and Taoism. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129, Mathematics Teaching. Very interesting. After listening to the teachings of Taoism, Sheldon showed strong curiosity. Since Mike's introduction to Taoism was not detailed enough, Sheldon was already thinking about where to go to learn more about it. At this time, Mary also came back from the door. She took over the task of preparing for the wedding, and her face was still a little happy. "Mom, can you tell me about Christianity?" Sheldon took the opportunity to ask. Of course, Mary, who thought her youngest son had finally changed his mind, was surprised to introduce Christianity to the other party in detail. However, after listening to Mary's story, Sheldon was still not satisfied. He felt that he still didn't know enough about the church. "Dad, can you take me to the library? I want to see some information about the church." Sheldon sought help from his father. George, who was lying on the sofa and drinking beer comfortably, glanced at the weather outside the window that was about to get dark and said lazily, "Shelly, it's too late today. How about I take you there when I have time?" In fact, George's new job in the sporting goods store has been very busy during this period, and he can't get away even on weekends. The previous answer was more of a perfunctory answer to her youngest son. As for little Sheldon, he was planning to have a discussion with Pastor Jeff tomorrow, and there was not much time left for him to prepare. Seeing her little Sheldon's anxious look, Grandma Connie said, "Don't worry, little cookie. Grandma knows a 24-hour library. I'll take you there now." Really? Little Sheldon showed surprise on his face. Of course Grandma Connie smiled and touched her grandson's head, then turned to Mike and said, "Mike, go back and rest first. Grandma will definitely be back very late tonight." Then, Grandma Connie explained to George and his wife, and took little Sheldon and Mike away from the Cooper family. It was not until the three of them left that Mary realized that her youngest son understood the intention of Christianity, not to believe in God, but to refute Pastor Jeff tomorrow. Such a result disappointed Mary. On the other side, the three people who went out quickly split into two groups. Mike, after watching Grandma Connie drive Sheldon to the library, went back to his own nest. Although he could still handle the huge amount of exercise this week, he was a little tired mentally, so now Mike just wanted to have a good sleep. And Sheldon, who went to the library, learned about Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, even Voodoo and Satan, as well as Catholicism and Mormonism. It must be said that Sheldon's IQ of 187 is very useful. It only took him half a night to summarize the knowledge he needed. After experiencing the baptism of various church knowledge, Sheldon was full of confidence in tomorrow's debate. After getting what he needed, Sheldon, who had supported himself to this day with enthusiasm, finally couldn't hold on mentally. After all, physiologically speaking, he was only a 9-year-old child. Looking at her grandson sleeping on the desk in the library, Grandma Connie didn't wake him up. She gently carried her grandson into the car and drove all the way back to Cooper's house. In the living room, Mary, who was worried about her youngest son, did not sleep either. When she saw Grandma Connie coming back, she quickly took little Sheldon from her arms. After being sent back to the room by his mother and lying down, little Sheldon woke up. He blinked, looked at his mother in front of him, and asked, "Mom, if I don't believe in God, will you blame me?" Mary felt very distressed when she heard her youngest son's sleepy voice. She comforted him and said, "No, whether you believe in religion or not, Mom will always love you." "Thank you," little Sheldon muttered, and fell asleep peacefully. In the church on the weekend, little Sheldon, who was well prepared, found that Pastor Jeff was a little strange today. What's wrong with him? Little Sheldon was very concerned about the state of his opponent. When Pastor Jeff was preaching the doctrine today, he always smiled foolishly at one place from time to time. And the person sitting in that direction was the female traffic police Robin. Grandma Connie, who knew from Mary that Pastor Jeff was going to get married, looked back and forth at the new Liwats and said, "I heard the sound of candy being torn apart." It's really annoying in Grandma Connie's opinion. Pastor Jeff's behavior at this moment was tantamount to openly showing off his affection. This kind of dog food behavior was very unfriendly to the single Grandma Connie. "Candy? Where is the candy?" Missy, who was dozing off on the side, suddenly became energetic when she heard about the candy. Seeing her little daughter's confused look, Mary shook her head and said, "No candy." While Mary was disciplining her little daughter, the sound woke up little George, who was catching up on his sleep. "Is it over? Can we go now?" Little George rubbed his eyes and got up in confusion. This time, little George's behavior completely annoyed Mary. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book bar. Seeing the family gradually becoming noisy, little Sheldon, who first asked questions, leaned back in disgust, trying to pretend that he didn't know little George and others. Fortunately, Pastor Jeff on the stage was not paying attention here, so the Cooper family did not lose face in this service. After the service, Pastor Jeff also announced his wedding date to everyone in the church. Then, after the service, Pastor Jeff took Robin to find Mary and expressed his gratitude to her. After a conversation, Pastor Jeff sent Robin away and then took little Sheldon and Missy to the church classroom. Here, little Sheldon also saw two acquaintances, Billy and Barbie, the children from the neighbors. Both of these children left little Sheldon with bad memories. Therefore, little Sheldon's first impression of the church classroom dropped a lot. So, he moved a set of tables and chairs to the side and separated himself from other children who came to study by a long distance. Quiet Pastor Jeff waited until little Sheldon finished his action before continuing. "Today, I will tell you about the origin of Christianity. The purpose of the church classroom is to promote Christianity to children and cultivate their interest. So, here, Pastor Jeff will try to pick some simple and interesting content to talk about. and this level of content will obviously not satisfy little Sheldon. So, after Pastor Jeff preached a short paragraph of basic knowledge, little Sheldon raised his hand. "Sheldon, do you have any questions?" Pastor Jeff did not realize the seriousness of the problem. "Of course, I have studied Christianity, Taoism, Judaism, etc." After a long speech, little Sheldon finally said, "So, I combined the concepts of various churches and decided to start a new church mathematics church." What? Pastor Jeff was a little suspicious that he had heard it wrong. "My mathematics church is a combination of science and Olympiad knowledge." Little Sheldon stood up and came to the front, solemnly asking, "Is there anyone who wants to join the mathematics church? I can teach him profound Olympiad knowledge." Yes, little Sheldon is ready to recruit people for his church. Before the children below understood what was going on, Billy raised his chubby little hand. "Very good, Billy. You are now a member of the math church." Little Sheldon nodded with satisfaction and continued, "Now, is there anything you want to know?" "I want to know, is the math church edible?" Billy asked innocently. "No, our church only teaches knowledge related to mathematics," little Sheldon explained distressedly. Chapter 130 Apology. Is math class fun? Will we have activities on weekends? What benefits does math class have? Will we get candy? With Billy taking the lead, the children below started asking some strange questions. Of course, in addition to the core doctrines, a church needs to have enough benefits to attract believers. Little Sheldon had never considered these. He established math class just to spread science. As for the benefits, activities and how to operate math class, they were all blank. At this moment, facing the children below, asking about the benefits of math class, little Sheldon didn't know how to respond. Pastor Jeff, who was standing aside, saw that little Sheldon had made a mess in the small classroom, and he could only take him out of the classroom. Although he felt a little sorry for Mary, for the sake of classroom discipline, Pastor Jeff finally chose to send little Sheldon, the trouble, directly back to the Cooper family. Time passed quickly, and it was Monday again. In order to curb the continued fermentation of the leaflet incident last week, the school specially invited a space expert from the space agency to give a lecture at the school. Aerospace, space, rockets, these all sound like high-end things, and they have a strong appeal to high school students. Even if some students don't like it, it seems more face-saving to be able to attend a professional aerospace class and brag about it outside. With this cognition, coupled with the school's vigorous publicity, the students' attention has indeed shifted to the upcoming aerospace lecture, and Dr. Arnold of the Houston Space Agency happened to be Principal Tom's high school classmate. He is currently in charge of Mars landing plan. However, in order to help old classmates get rid of the negative impact of the leaflet incident, Dr. Arnold agreed to take some time off this Friday to come to Melford to give an aerospace open class. "Mike, what do you think Dr. Arnold looks like?" Karen asked curiously in the school cafeteria at noon. At this moment, most of the students in the school cafeteria were also discussing the mysterious Doctor of Aerospace. Due to the school's positive publicity for Dr. Arnold, it is easy to establish a knowledgeable, cultured and elegant image of this doctor among the students. Even the other party's title sounds like an older person. However, the students were more willing to believe that the doctor was a handsome old man. This kind of beautification of the other party is probably a kind of knowledge worship. Gretchen and Lina pricked up their ears curiously when they heard Karen's question at the dining table. Only Katie looked absent-minded. "I'm afraid I'll disappoint you." Looking at the eyes of the girls, Mike said in a joking tone, "Although I don't know what Dr. Arnold looks like, I can be sure that he is definitely a very smart person." Very smart? Listening to Mike's intentional emphasis, the girls quickly realized that Mike wanted to say that the other person had no hair. But think about it, a doctor of astronautics, who stays with complicated data every day, must not have much hair left. Originally, the girls were still fantasizing about the image of a doctor of astronautics, and they probably used Mike's image to enter. However, what Mike said was tantamount to breaking their beautiful imagination. Even Gretchen, who was usually gentle, glared at Mike with resentment at this time. "Hey, what are you guys talking about? Can I join you?" Regina came to the center of the cafeteria with a plate of food. Without waiting for the others to answer, Queen Bee sat down next to Mike skillfully. Today, Regina changed her makeup to a fresh one, and she was only wearing a simple white t-shirt, coupled with her sweet smile. This made Regina exude a mature and intellectual charm at the moment. Of course, Regina's current outfit did not meet the dress code requirements of the Devil Body team. But fortunately, during the time when Queen Bee left, the remaining members of the Devil Body team unanimously agreed to abolish the dress code requirements for the team members. So strictly speaking, Regina's current image was not considered a violation. "Why are you here?" Karen questioned, and her eyes revealed an expression of "you are not welcome here." The situation of the other girls was similar to Karen. "I'm also a member of the Devil Body team, why can't I come?" Regina seemed to not understand what the girls meant. While speaking, she deliberately moved closer to Mike. She looked like she was asserting her sovereignty. However, in her actions, the Queen Bee was very measured and tried not to offend Mike. At the table, except for Gretchen, who was still confused, the other girls all looked at Mike with dissatisfaction in their eyes. Obviously, they saw something from Regina's ambiguous behavior. A good lunchtime was about to turn into a surer field. A correct version of the book in 1619. Mike coughed lightly to ease the embarrassment, and then said, "Okay, let's eat. Lunchtime is almost over." Seeing Mike's guilty performance, the girls who had a relationship with him were more certain of the current situation. It was obvious that Regina had also taken advantage of Mike. However, they also had some understanding of Mike's fickleness. At this point, after glaring at Mike, the girls did not make trouble in the cafeteria and quietly enjoyed their lunch. On the other side, Regina saw the reactions of the crowd and raised her lips slightly, but she wisely did not make trouble again. The dull lunchtime was over. When Mike walked quickly towards the mathematical Olympiad study room, Katie caught up with him from behind. "Do you want to ask me about Regina?" Mike stopped and asked. No. Katie stared at Mike seriously for a few seconds and shook her head. "I want to ask you, is there any way for me to repair my relationship with teacher Sharon?" Katie has been troubled by this problem for the past 2 days. As for the matter between Mike and Regina, the girl had already noticed it last Friday night. Since she had turned into Mike's shape, the girl knew that it would be useless if she made a scene, which would only cause a rift in their relationship. Therefore, for Mike's fickleness, the girl chose to deal with it in a relaxed manner and leave the problem to time. In this situation, Katie's biggest concern now is how to repair her relationship with teacher Sharon. Teacher Sharon. Hearing the girl's troubles, Mike said, "You need to give the other party a sincere apology. If you feel that you can't say it, you can also write the apology in a letter and give it to the other party." Based on Mike's understanding of teacher Sharon, the other party does not seem to be a vengeful person. As long as Katie can get over it and sincerely apologize to the other party, she will most likely get teacher Sharon's forgiveness. Mike had also mentioned this method to Katie before. Bringing up the old matter again this time also gave the girl more motivation. Chapter 131 Computer. Later, during the mathematical Olympiad study time, when teacher Sharon entered the classroom, she kept a cold expression on her face. When she was teaching, her eyes also deliberately avoided Katie. This situation made the atmosphere in the study room extremely depressing. The mathematical Olympiad team members who knew something about the conflict between teacher Sharon and Katie behaved very well in this class, for fear of offending the teacher. After the mathematical Olympiad study was over, even Captain Kevin, who was extremely lively in the past, quietly escaped from the classroom this time. Soon, only Sharon, Katie and Mike were left in the classroom. Seeing that teacher Sharon was about to leave with the lesson plan, Katie hurried over. "Zoo, teacher Sharon, I'm sorry for spreading rumors about you before." "Sorry." Katie apologized sincerely and handed over a letterhead. Obviously, Katie chose to apologize in 2 ways this time. Teacher Sharon looked at Katie expressionlessly and then read the letterhead in her hand. "Your main task now is to study, and I can't control other things. So, you take care of yourself." After reading the letter, teacher Sharon still looked cold. After saying that, she didn't look at Katie again, leaving only the back view of the girl. "Has the teacher forgiven me?" Katie asked uncertainly. Looking at teacher Sharon's reaction just now, Katie, as one of the parties involved, didn't guess what the other party meant at all. As a bystander, Mike saw it very clearly. Although teacher Sharon's expression was not obvious, he could still feel that she had forgiven the girl. "Don't worry, Katie. The teacher has forgiven you," Mike answered. "Really?" Katie was still unsure. "I see from the teacher's expression that it doesn't seem to mean that." "Then what else do you want? Isn't teacher Sharon's expression always like that? Could it be that you still want her to give you a hug?" Mike smiled and shook his head, then stretched out his arms and joked, "There is an embrace here that can comfort you. Thank you." After the reminder, Katie's heart knot was also untied. Then, the girl took the initiative to throw herself into Mike's arms. Time came to this Friday afternoon, which was the time for Dr. Arnold's public class in Melford. That afternoon, the school cancelled all outdoor activities and let the students gather in the big meeting. Among the vast number of students, little Sheldon, who was full of enthusiasm for science, once again grabbed a seat in the middle of the front row. "What's wrong, Mike? You don't look very happy." The excited little Sheldon looked at Mike, who was not in a good state. "It's okay, I'm fine." Mike shook his head. In fact, he didn't have a good week. Since their relationship with Regina was exposed, Katie and the other girls didn't say anything, but they felt a little uncomfortable. Among them, Karen had the strongest reaction. In order to appease several girls, Mike has made great efforts this week. His body of more than 200 physiques almost couldn't bear it. "I'm glad you're okay." Little Sheldon showed concern for others for a rare time, and then continued, "What do you think Dr. Arnold will tell us later?" Little Sheldon, who loves scientific knowledge, has been looking forward to this day for a long time. He really hopes to learn some useful knowledge from Dr. Arnold today. In aerospace knowledge, there should be a lot of things to talk about, such as rocket launch, thrusters, and recovery, Mike said casually. Listening to the other party's story, little Sheldon's eyes became brighter and brighter, and he looked forward to the next lecture even more. Dr. Arnold didn't let the students wait any longer. After everyone sat down neatly, the door of the conference room was pushed open. Accompanied by Principal Tom, Dr. Arnold walked into the conference room. He was only a little over 1.6 meters tall, with a fat body, a hunchback, and more than half of his hair had fallen off. Dr. Arnold's image broke the students' previous fantasies. Mike vaguely heard the disappointed sighs of the girls behind him. And little Sheldon, who was standing next to him, was even more excited after seeing Dr. Arnold. The other person's appearance was in line with his guess about the image of a scholar. "Hello everyone." Dr. Arnold greeted the students humorously. It can be seen that this 50-year-old doctor of aerospace has a very easygoing personality. "I'm Ronald from the Houston Space Agency, and I'm now in charge of Mars landing plan." Ronald introduced himself to the students skillfully. The clever self-introduction also helped the doctor attract the students' attention. "Everyone knows that there is no gravity in outer space. So how do our astronauts live?" Dr. Arnold obviously didn't think that high school students could understand the profound knowledge of aerospace. So he chose to tell the students some strange stories in space, such as how astronauts solve problems such as drinking water and eating in the space station. Ronald was very relaxed in talking about this kind of interesting knowledge, and the students loved to listen. As Dr. Arnold explained in a joking way, the students laughed in the conference room. A perfect version of the book in 169 bar. In a cheerful atmosphere, Ronald fulfilled his promise to his old classmates, and Principal Tom diverted the students' attention, and the students also gained joy in this open class. So this event can be regarded as a win-win-win. However, the little Sheldon below, listening to Dr. Arnold's narration, wrinkled his face. He couldn't believe that this was the aerospace lecture he had been looking forward to for a long time. What Dr. Arnold was talking about now could not be said to have nothing to do with aerospace, but it could only be said to be perfunctory enough. So, little Sheldon raised his hand resolutely. "Oh, there is another little friend here." Dr. Arnold used his exaggerated tone again, to win a burst of laughter for himself. Then, he said, "Little friend, do you have any questions?" Being treated as a child by the other party made little Sheldon very dissatisfied. But he still patiently said, "Drive Ronald, I want to know some more useful knowledge. For example, the theory or formula of rocket launch." After the failure of his rocket research last time, little Sheldon was very concerned about the rocket launch. However, his young face did not receive enough attention from Dr. Ronald. "You are still young. These are not the issues you should care about." Ronald smiled and continued, "Why don't I tell you how astronauts use the toilet in space?" Thinking of the scene of feces floating in the air without gravity in space, the students laughed again. "No, I don't want to know about the toilet. I just want to know the principle of rocket launch." Little Sheldon felt insulted, and his face tightened. Okay, Dr. Ronald waved his hand like coaxing a child, and then asked, "Is there anyone on the scene who can answer this kid's question?" Obviously, at this moment, Dr. Ronald was still thinking about mobilizing the atmosphere on the scene. In his heart, he didn't think anyone could answer this question. "Three-stage propulsion method," Mike said out loud, unable to bear the other party's bullying of children. Interesting. Dr. Ronald understood what Mike said, and he asked with interest, "Can you explain it in detail?" The current rocket launch has not yet developed into a multi-stage propulsion method. To professionals, Mike's proposal is very advanced. The three-stage propulsion method divides the propeller into multiple sections for assembly. When one stage of propulsion is completed, the propeller can be separated and recovered. Mike explained the theory of rocket segment propulsion. Rocket launch has very high requirements for propellers, and multi-stage propulsion can theoretically help rockets reduce weight at different time periods. Once this theory can be maturely applied to aerospace, it will definitely save NASA a lot of expenses. Very interesting conjecture. After listening to Mike's story, Dr. Ronald thought for a long time. However, in the end he shook his head and said, "It's a pity that our current technology cannot meet that requirement. Multi-stage propulsion can theoretically save a lot of costs, but the technical requirements are also more stringent." Chapter 130 to Computer continued. Every technological innovation in aerospace requires repeated verification, and the manpower, material resources, funds, and materials consumed in this process are not something that a doctor of aerospace can decide. Therefore, although Dr. Ronald thinks that Mike's multi-stage propulsion theory is very good, however, because this theory is too advanced, he feels that it is not feasible enough. This classmate's ideas are very good. "Please allow me to ask, what is your name?" Dr. Ronald asked humorously. "He called me Mike." A group of girls below helped Mike answer the question. "Very good. It seems that Mike is very popular in school." Dr. Ronald smiled, and then continued, "Then please let us applaud Mike's ideas." With the enthusiastic applause of the students, Dr. Ronald also reflected on himself. He realized that he might have had a prejudice against public high school students before, thinking that they who received happy education could not understand the advanced knowledge of aerospace. However, after listening to Mike's advanced theory, Dr. Ronald also realized that even in public high schools, there is no shortage of smart people, and the development of science and technology is often driven by these few smart people. So, in the following time, Dr. Ronald really explained the knowledge in the field of aerospace, and these obscure professional knowledge are very boring to outsiders who don't know the field. So, after listening to the professional knowledge of aerospace for a while, the students below became drowsy, as if they were hypnotized, and the atmosphere of the open class became dull. However, seeing that Mike and a few other students were listening carefully, Dr. Ronald still chose to explain the entire set of rocket launch theories in detail. When the school bell rang, Dr. Ronald's lecture was coming to an end. He clapped his hands, attracted the students' attention again, and said, "Thank you all for listening patiently to me, an old man, nagging for an afternoon." Ronald, who became humorous again, once again used his own words to win a burst of laughter from the students. Then, he continued, "Today's lecture ends here. If any students are interested in aerospace, you can come to Houston, NASA to find me." While speaking, Dr. Ronald looked at Mike in the front row, and it was obvious that his words were meaningful. It can also be said that Mike's previous performance won the recognition of this doctor of astronautics. Next, Principal Tom, who was very satisfied with the effect of this open class, walked onto the stage to announce the disbandment. Seeing that Dr. Ronald was about to leave, the little Sheldon, who was in deep thought, suddenly stood up and chased after him. Drive Ronald, I think there are still some flaws in the rocket launch theory you just talked about. Little Sheldon stopped the other party and said, it has to be said that the brain with an intelligence of 187 is very useful. Little Sheldon just understood the principle of rocket launch today through a wide open class. Moreover, he also noticed loopholes in these complex theoretical formulas. The reason why little Sheldon was thinking just now was to think about how to solve these loopholes. On the other side, Dr. Ronald saw that the child with a strong desire for knowledge came over again and couldn't help shaking his head. You must know that the existing rocket launch theory is derived from the summary of practice by countless experts. Therefore, Dr. Ronald does not think that a child can have any insights. Oh, what did you find? Dr. Ronald asked. Although he had a smile on his face, his attitude and tone were still like teasing a child. And little Sheldon, who had the image memory method, quickly repeated the places he thought had problems one by one. Dr. Ronald was also surprised at little Sheldon's strong memory. However, the problems that little Sheldon mentioned were also the problems that countless aerospace experts are trying to solve. Do you have any solutions to these problems? Dr. Ronald asked half jokingly. This question stumped little Sheldon. Even if his brain was smart enough, he couldn't think of a solution for a while when there was not enough data and time. Obviously, the problems that stumped countless experts are not that simple. Okay, kid. Again, these problems are not what you should consider now. Your current task is to grow up well. Sure enough, Dr. Ronald still treated little Sheldon as a child. After being looked down upon by the other party again and again, Sheldon finally couldn't help it. He seriously retorted, no, as long as you give me time, I will find a way to solve those problems. Okay, whatever you want. Dr. Ronald smiled and shook his head and left with the principal. This time, Dr. Ronald's casual and perfunctory behavior completely aroused Sheldon's strong competitive spirit. He decided to find the right way to make the other party apologize for his arrogance. Mike, I think we can talk. Your multi-stage propulsion theory and propeller recovery conjecture should be added to my plan. Little Sheldon, who had made up his mind, sought help from Mike on the side. Since he decided to sweep the other party's face, Sheldon felt that he had to do his best with his plan. A perfect version of the book in 1619. So, Mike spent the rest of this Friday discussing the theory of rocket launch with Sheldon. Although Mike has not studied rocket launch specifically, he has the characteristics of memory palace and has a lot of advanced theoretical knowledge in his mind to discuss. Before dinner time, Mike and Sheldon had already discussed a complete plan for rocket launch and thruster recovery. What was needed next was a large amount of complicated data sorting. Shelly, what's wrong with you? Mary, who had prayed before dinner, looked at Sheldon in a daze and asked. I'm sorting out the data. Sheldon, who had come to his senses, said distressedly, there's too much data, and my brain seems to be a little insufficient. There are many aspects to consider in rocket launch, and the amount of data is also terrifying. Even Sheldon's brain can't take care of all of them. Looking at her youngest son's mysterious look, Mary, who felt she couldn't help, could only shake her head helplessly. Missy, who was sitting opposite, said curiously, data? Is it a mathematical calculation? If you can't figure it out, why don't you use a calculator? Missy's innocent words made Sheldon's eyes light up. Yes, if his brain can't calculate it, why not use tools? When he went to a large shopping mall, Sheldon loved to study the computers used for display in the mall. Little Sheldon had already mastered the simple use of computers. Now, he realized what he needed. Dad, can you buy me a computer? Little Sheldon asked. Computer? George, who was called, thought for a moment and shook his head to refuse. No, that thing is too expensive. Besides, we don't need it. George had also visited the computers in the mall. In his impression, it was just a big-headed TV that could be used to play small games. There was no other use. Of course, the main reason was that the thing was too expensive. Any one of them cost more than 2,000 yuan. George, who lost his job in high-tech, didn't think his family could afford it. Chapter 133 Money Making Plan. Why not? Little Sheldon argued. With a computer, I can file taxes for my family more conveniently. And the backup recording program inside can also record the menu at home. In addition, it can be used to chat with people I don't know online. I can also watch the cartoons I want to watch on it. Little Sheldon cleverly proposed some conveniences that computers can bring to the family. Thus, he increased the persuasiveness of his behavior of buying a computer. Obviously, his rhetoric is very useful. Hearing that the computer can make it more convenient to file taxes for the family, George was a little tempted. But after thinking again and again, he shook his head and confessed, "I'm sorry, Shelley. There is no extra money at home to buy a computer." Hearing George's words, Missy, who was looking forward to watching cartoons on the computer, and little George, who was looking forward to chatting on the internet, lowered their heads at the same time. As children of the Cooper family, they can understand the difficulties of the family. Just when the children were disappointed, Mary suddenly said, "Maybe we can get together the money to buy a computer. I still have more than 1,000 yuan." "What? You are still hiding private money?" Hearing his wife's words, George couldn't sit still. The financial status of the Cooper family is very transparent. As far as George knows, the family's public accounts clearly show that there is no money. Now his wife can still take out more than 1,000 yuan, which proves that she has hidden private money. Mary has only been working in the church for a short time, and her salary is not high. So Mary's private money must have been there a long time ago. At that time, the only source of income for the family was George's salary. Therefore, the final conclusion is that Mary used George's salary to save her own private money. This discovery made George, who had been having trouble at work recently, very unbalanced. "This money is all saved from my daily living expenses." Mary did not think there was anything wrong with her behavior of saving private money. Then, she questioned her husband, "I don't believe that you don't have money hidden there." George wanted to say that he didn't, but how could a man not hide private money? At this point, he also admitted angrily, "I have 300 yuan here. But, that's all I deserve." Mary didn't care about her husband's little emotions at this time. She was still thinking, "I have 1,000 here, you have 300, plus our current salary. Maybe at the end of next month, our family can afford a computer." From this, we can see that Mary attaches great importance to the needs of her youngest son. However, Mary's unconscious behavior also annoyed George. George, who felt that he had less and less status at home, said angrily, "No, don't think about taking my money. I would rather use it to buy beer." Mary still couldn't sympathize with her husband's temper. She retorted, "You can't drink too much beer with your current health. It's better to use the money to buy a computer, which is good for everyone. You want to deprive me of the right to drink beer?" George, who has been frustrated in life recently, relies on beer to relieve his mood. He has a rebellious mentality towards his wife's request. Seeing that George and his wife quarreled more and more fiercely, they scared the children. Grandma Connie quickly said, "I still have some savings, or I will pay for it." In Grandma Connie's view, buying a computer is the origin of the conflict between George and his wife. As long as this trouble is solved, the conflict in the Cooper family will be gone. However, as the quarrel progressed, the conflict between George and his wife was no longer limited to computers. Besides, the computer did not help Grandma Connie's life at all, and there was no reason for her to pay for it. Just as George and his wife were about to continue to gossip about the past, Mike, who had just finished dinner, looked up and said, "I have plans to buy a computer recently. If anyone needs it, I can lend it to you when I don't use it." "Really, Mike? Can I borrow it to watch cartoons?" Missy asked. Mike smiled and nodded. "Then can I borrow it to chat with others?" Little George also asked excitedly. Mike nodded again. Since the nature of Mike's purchase of a computer was different from that of Grandma Connie, Mary had no reason to stop him. However, she still asked, "Mike, what are you going to use the computer for?" "Stocks," Mike answered concisely. During this period, Mike also realized the importance of financial freedom to men. Look at George, whose family status is getting lower and lower. This is a negative example of a man who has no money. Mike, who has a forward-looking vision, quickly thought that stock trading is the easiest and simplest way to make money at this stage. Now is the era of the American economy taking off. Semiconductors, vending machines, retail industries, internet companies, etc. are all developing rapidly. As long as Mike can catch this ride, He is sure to achieve financial freedom in short-term stockholding. Stocks. Mary didn't know much about this industry, so she didn't say much. Mike, who had a legitimate reason to buy a computer, also indirectly helped the Cooper family and temporarily resolved a family dispute. Time came to Saturday morning, the day when Pastor Jeff got married. Because the preparations for this wedding were handled by Mary, so at her request, the Cooper family, Grandma Connie and Michael went to the church to watch the ceremony. The solemn church in the past was now decorated with various ribbons and flowers, making the atmosphere much warmer. The audience seats below were also filled with believers and family members, and everyone had a celebratory smile on their faces. I'm afraid that only George, who was sitting next to his wife in the front row, looked unhappy with his shrugged face. Obviously, yesterday's computer purchase incident still left a bad memory in his heart. Read the correct version in 16:9 book forum. As the bells of the auditorium rang, Pastor Jeff took Robin's hand and walked slowly from one end of the red carpet. When the two walked to the front of the stage and stopped, an elderly pastor in the witness stand read the wedding speech to the two. At this holy moment, Mary looked at the two happy people on the stage, and her heart was touched. She remembered a happy time when she and George were young. Slowly, Mary reached out and held her husband's big hand. George was a little surprised at his wife's behavior, and then he smiled a little. The wedding ceremony on the stage was also coming to an end with Jeff's "I do. Now, you can kiss each other." The witness pastor read. Jeff and Robin, who had been waiting for this moment for a long time, couldn't wait to hug each other after the witness pastor read the process. Then, the two performed a kiss that lasted for several minutes for all the people who came to watch the ceremony. "Why do I have to watch a middle-aged couple kissing on the weekend?" Little Sheldon complained with his eyes wide open. His current thoughts also represent the thoughts of many people in the church. And this embarrassing scene also made Mary, the wedding planner, frown. She silently prayed that the two people on the stage would not do anything more outrageous. However, Jeff and Robin, who were having a hot fight, were obviously going to disappoint Mary. OMG, accompanied by exclamations. Pastor Jeff's tongue-sticking action made many spectators cover their children's eyes. Mary, of course, quickly used her hands to block the eyes of little Sheldon and Missy to prevent them from seeing the scene that was not suitable for children. Then, with the good-natured laughter of the adults, Pastor Jeff hurriedly hugged Robin and left the church. "What are they so anxious to do?" Missy asked curiously as she looked at the backs of Jeff and Robin leaving. "Of course, go home to peel off the candy's outer shell and then do something pleasant," Grandma Connie explained to Missy in an inappropriate way. Looking at their expressions, maybe they are just in a hurry. "I have had this experience too." Little Sheldon's calm analytical voice was heard from the side. Chapter 134 Contradiction. Pastor Jeff's wedding was very simple, and there was no dinner or other activities afterwards. After all, the purpose of his marriage this time was just to get the license, so that he could drive with a license. After the wedding was hastily ended, the Cooper family, who had nothing to do, chose to accompany Mike to the largest shopping mall in town to buy a computer. The lowest configuration computer here is about 2,000 yuan. The price of a high-end computer easily exceeds more than 10,000. After consideration, Mike chose a mid to high-end computer of more than 5,000. Looking at the big-headed computer, he also felt a little nostalgic. The after-sales service of the shopping mall was very good. In just one afternoon, the delivery, installation, and network cable were all completed. Before dinner time, the Cooper family and Grandma Connie were all curiously gathered in front of the newly installed computer. "Go, Mike. Turn it on," Grandma Connie urged with a smile. This computer was purchased by Mike, and he should have the first right to turn it on. The Cooper family also looked at Mike expectantly, waiting for him to operate the computer. Seeing this, Mike did not refuse, and pressed the computer power button. With the low pixel picture quality, the computer screen displayed a retro startup animation. "Oh, this picture is so clear," little George sighed after the computer screen froze. For Mike, who has seen high definition picture quality, the current computer pixels are not satisfactory. However, for the Cooper family and Grandma Connie, the computer picture quality of more than 5,000 is already very good. At least it is much clearer than the TV picture quality at Cooper's house. Mike, can I watch Tom and Jerry? I didn't watch the TV broadcast yesterday. Missy looked at Mike coquettishly. Of course Mike agreed and searched for Tom and Jerry episodes on the web. Then, the little girl selected the episodes. Then the family gathered in front of the computer and watched an episode of the cartoon with Missy. It's my turn. It's my turn after a cartoon was played. George excitedly shouted, Mike, can you help me create an online account? The kind that can be used for chatting. When speaking, George deliberately raised his eyebrows to Mike, with a smile on his face. Looking at the other party's hormonal performance, Mike shook his head and helped George create a chat account on the chat software that came with the computer. Then, Mike selected according to the conditions and added several female netizens to the account. Okay, you can use this account now to chat with the other party. Mike gave up his position and said, under the gaze of everyone, George excitedly came to the computer and typed on the keyboard with trembling hands, are you there? As the message was sent out, George seemed to have completed a difficult task. On the side, watching George's operation, Grandma Connie said, this is nothing. It's not as convenient as chatting on the phone. Mary nodded in agreement. At this time, George excitedly shouted, she answered me. She said hello. How should I reply? George was still excited about his first online chat. Don't get excited, George. Mike instructed, you can say whatever you want. After listening to Mike's words, George calmed down. Then, he sent out what he wanted to say on the screen. Are you a brother or a sister? After George sent out the chat content that he thought was great, a look of come and praise me appeared on his face. Grandma Connie, who really didn't want to see George's proud look, changed the subject and said, today is a memorable day, why don't you have dinner at my place? After saying her suggestion, Grandma Connie looked at George and said with a smile, George, I have a good thing for you later. The good thing that Grandma Connie mentioned was the beef she prepared for Mike before, but the other party refused. It was just right to give it to George at this opportunity, and it might even promote the relationship between George and his wife. Really? Thank you. George smiled and thanked Connie's grandmother for her kindness. Then, Connie and Mary went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for the family. George, who was embarrassed to compete with the children for the right to use the computer, also went to the sofa to watch TV. In front of the computer, after George's question was sent out, the other party did not respond for a long time. Finally, with the prompt sound of the computer system, a small box appeared on the screen. Looking at the prompt in the box, the other party has deleted your friend. Little George fell into self-doubt. He couldn't understand why the online friend who had been chatting well before deleted him. Little George, who didn't believe in evil, sorted out his mood and found another online friend again and started his online chat journey. However, after a few minutes, when the prompt the other party has deleted your friend appeared on the screen again, little George couldn't hold it anymore. Why is this? Little George looked at the prompt box and was about to shut himself up. Your intention is too obvious, which can easily scare the other party. Mike reminded the other party. In the 16:9 book, you can see the correct version. Little George's series of outrageous actions cannot be said to be wrong, but the approach is too direct. It's like grabbing someone on the street and asking him, would you like to date me? If this approach were in reality, the other party might consider it a little, based on the appearance of the person asking the question. However, in the virtual network, few people are used to such rude practices. After being reminded by Mike, little George seemed to realize where he went wrong. Just as he was about to regroup, little Sheldon stepped forward and said, it's my turn. Little George looked at little Sheldon, and then looked at the computer reluctantly. In the end, he gave up his seat. Little Sheldon, who sat in front of the computer, took out a booklet from his body, which recorded the process required for rocket launch. Then, he called up the computer document and began to calculate the complex formulas in the booklet. More than half an hour later, when little Sheldon's operation became more and more proficient, Grandma Connie also prepared dinner. At the table, Grandma Connie skillfully distributed the secret barbecue to everyone's plate. When it was George's turn, she smiled and sent a whole beef to his plate. George didn't expect that this was what Grandma Connie prepared for him. He looked a little embarrassed at first, but after secretly glancing at his wife, He also gladly accepted Grandma Connie's kindness. After a pleasant barbecue dinner, little Sheldon occupied the computer again. George and his wife sat on the sofa with Grandma Connie and watched TV programs. Mike was looking through comic books with Missy. It was 12 o'clock, and he looked at his little daughter who was beginning to doze off. Mary urged the tireless little Sheldon, who was still sitting in front of the computer. "Shelly, we should go home." "Wait a minute, I still have a lot of work to do," little Sheldon answered perfunctorily, while typing on the keyboard quickly. Seeing that Mary was angry, Grandma Connie came to the computer and persuaded, "Little biscuit, you should rest. If you want to play on the computer, you can come back tomorrow." Little Sheldon wanted to say that he was not playing, but when he looked at the sky outside, he stood up sensibly. Before leaving, he also made a special agreement with Mike about the right to use the computer tomorrow. Chapter 135, Waiting for Reply. The rocket launch plan written by Sheldon incorporates the multi-stage propulsion theory and thruster recovery theory proposed by Mike, and the amount of work is very large. He also needs Mike to be on the side as a reference for the following calculations. This also explained this need before Sheldon left. After the Cooper family left, Mike sat in front of the computer. Soon the computer interface jumped to the stock page. Mike still has more than 20,000 funds on hand. After some screening, he noticed two rising stocks. Microsoft has gradually shown the demeanor of an industry giant. With his advanced vision, Mike can be sure that this stock is a sure win and is very suitable for long-term holding. So, he invested 10,000 yuan in Microsoft shares without hesitation. As for the remaining funds, Mike looked at the retail food industry. Coca-Cola and Best, two beverages, also have a very strong upward momentum. Knowing that these two cola drinks will be sold all over the world in the future, Mike did not hesitate too much. After leaving a small amount of pocket expenses, he invested the remaining 10,000 yuan in these two companies. "Mike, what are you doing?" After cleaning up the dishes, Grandma Connie came to the computer and looked at the zigzag stock market line and asked curiously, "This is the stock I mentioned before." Mike briefly introduced the profit model of stocks to the other party. Then, he suggested, "It's easy to make money in the stock market now. Do you want to buy some?" Mike has thought about making a fortune with Grandma Connie and the Cooper family. As long as Grandma Connie is interested, Mike can help her set up a stock market account now and make money together. On the side, Grandma Connie looked at the stock market trend on the computer and pondered for a long time. Finally, she shook her head. "Forget it, I don't understand these things. Let's talk about it later." In fact, Grandma Connie is very keen on some gambling activities, so she is naturally tempted to buy stocks. It's just a pity that, although Grandma Connie still has some cash on hand, she owed a lot of foreign debts in the game hall some time ago. So, after considering many aspects, Grandma Connie finally decided to keep the money for emergency use. "Okay, when you want to buy stocks, you can come to me for reference." Mike saw that Grandma Connie was in trouble, and after mentioning it for a while, he didn't persuade her anymore. This kind of thing should be left to nature. When Mike makes money in the stock market in the future, Grandma Connie will naturally know what to do. Moreover, as far as Mike knows, there will be Facebook and Bitcoin in the next few years, two money-making tools. With this understanding, Mike doesn't have to be too anxious now. He just needs to slowly accumulate his strength and see if he can make a fortune at that time. If this big plan succeeds, Mike will be promoted to the wealthy class, and if he leaks some gaps in his hands, it will be enough for people around him to make a profit together. If it fails, it seems that there is no loss. After all, stocks are just one of Mike's ways to make money. After successfully buying stocks, he simply washed up and went back to his room to rest. On the other side, Grandma Connie, who had been resting for a long time, saw Mike leave and secretly came to the living room again. Standing in front of the computer, she carefully pressed the power button. In fact, Grandma Connie is a person who is very willing to accept new things. She is very interested in the computer at home. Before, because there were many people waiting to play with the computer, she was embarrassed to compete with the children. So, she chose to study this new object alone at night. Following Mike's previous operation, Grandma Connie successfully adjusted the computer to the chat interface, but she didn't know how to create an account, so she began to feel troubled. Finally, she tried to make a phone call and said to the mouse, "Hello, is anyone there? I'm Connie. Please answer if you hear me." But the computer has not yet developed to such an intelligent stage, and Grandma Connie's behavior obviously did not get a response. I said, "The computer is not interesting." Grandma Connie, who did not get a response from the computer for a long time, found a good excuse for her embarrassment. Then, she turned off the computer and left the living room happily. Although Grandma Connie did not find the correct way to use the computer, she also played with the computer once and satisfied her curiosity. The next day, little Sheldon came to Grandma Connie's house early in the morning. The next whole day, Sheldon spent in front of the computer. During this period, he also looked for Mike several times to refer to his rocket launch plan. Finally, before dinner, Sheldon finished his plan, and he shouted happily, "Mike, come and see, our plan is completed." Yes, because Mike provided the theory, Sheldon also added him to the signature of the rocket launch plan. Then, under Mike's witness, Sheldon successfully sent the plan to the special mailbox of the Houston Space Agency. I'll call Dr. Arnold and ask him what he thinks of the new plan. Seeing that the email was sent, Sheldon hurried to the phone. He was looking forward to the scene where Dr. Arnold apologized to him after seeing the new plan. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. Wait, Sheldon. The email has just been sent, and Dr. Arnold may not be able to see it. It's better for you to call and ask tomorrow afternoon. Mike reminded. You know, today is the weekend, and it's so late. Even if someone in the Houston Space Agency is working overtime, they are probably going home now. What's more, the public mailbox of the space agency receives a lot of emails every day, and the email sent by little Sheldon may not be seen by the other party at the first time. After being reminded, little Sheldon obviously realized this. Well, it seems not bad to enjoy the victory tomorrow, little Sheldon said. Now this state of waiting for good news has made little Sheldon happy enough. Time flies, and soon it is Monday afternoon. After school, Mike returned home to rest for a while, and was about to go to Cooper's house for dinner with Grandma Connie. As a result, before the two of them went out, Mary brought little Sheldon and Missy to Grandma Connie's house. What's wrong? Mary. What happened? Grandma Connie looked at Mary's depressed look and asked with concern. I'm fine. Mary covered her face and continued in a low mood. Connie, can we stay at your house for a few days? Although I don't know what happened at Cooper's house, Mary doesn't look like she's fine. This is also your home. You can stay as long as you want. Grandma Connie said, took Mary into the living room and poured her a glass of water. Then, she called Sheldon and Missy aside and asked quietly, what happened at home? Why is Mary in such a bad mood? Mary and George had a fight, so we ran away from home. Little Sheldon answered. But seeing how Sheldon kept looking at the computer, he didn't care much about running away from home this time. Why did they have a fight? Weren't they fine before? Grandma Connie asked. I don't know. Little Sheldon shook his head. He was not very sensitive to the situation at home. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136 Waiting for Reply, continued. Just when Grandma Connie thought that her questioning was fruitless, Missy suddenly said, I know what happened between George and Mary. Oh, Missy, tell me. Grandma Connie looked at her granddaughter. Indeed, in terms of emotional intelligence, Missy is much better than little Sheldon. Mary wanted to confiscate George's private money, but George didn't want to, so he used the private money to buy a lot of beer. Then the two had a big fight. After Missy finished her discovery, she said, finally, Mary was angry and brought me and Sheldon here. After listening to the reason why George and his wife were upset, Grandma Connie's first feeling was that Mary's way of handling household chores was too strong. In the past, Mary's way of dealing with problems may have been correct, but recently a lot of unpleasant things have happened to George, and his emotions are in a sensitive period, and he needs more tolerance and understanding from his wife and family. However, it is obvious that Mary did not realize this. Instead, because she recently got a job in the church, she became more confident. Therefore, in the relationship between the couple, she also unconsciously wanted to control more dominance. If this kind of contradiction and cognitive error continues, even if there is no private money, it will explode sooner or later because of other things. The private money issue is at most a fuse. Grandma Connie, who saw the problem very thoroughly, immediately wanted to persuade her daughter. However, seeing that Mary was in a sad state, she decided to talk to her daughter after dinner, when her daughter's emotions were more stable. After the questioning, Grandma Connie went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for everyone, and little Sheldon also came to the computer with Missy. At this time, Mike was playing a small game on the computer. Looking at the little man jumping and holding mushrooms on the computer, Missy asked curiously, "Mike, what are you playing?" "Super Mario, a very interesting game. Do you want to try it?" Mike asked with a smile. Today's computer games are more of a nostalgia for Mike. After the novelty wears off, they are not interesting. Just as Mike was about to make way, Sheldon suddenly asked, "Mike, did Dr. Arnold reply to our email?" Hearing Sheldon's question, Mike switched the computer screen to the mailbox interface, and there was no new email in it. "The other party may not have seen the email you sent," Mike explained. "No, it's been a day. I'm going to call and ask." After saying this, Sheldon walked towards the landline at Connie's grandmother's house. It can be said that Sheldon was waiting for Dr. Arnold's reply all day. Now he was very dissatisfied to see that his achievements were not valued. On the other side, Mike also began to teach Missy to play small games on the computer. Until the little girl wasted 3 lives in a row, Sheldon also walked back angrily. "What's wrong, Sheldon? What did the other party say?" Mike asked. "The customer service of the space agency asked me not to make harassing calls to them again," Sheldon replied depressedly. The customer service staff on the other side probably heard from the voice that Sheldon was a child, so their attitude was not very good. After hearing about the unfair treatment of little Sheldon, Mike frowned and said, "I'll ask for you what's going on." After that, Mike took out his mobile phone and called the Houston Space Agency. "Hello, what can I do for you?" The person who answered the phone was a female customer service representative with a clear voice. "I want to ask if Dr. Arnold received the email we sent to him before." Mike asked, "Excuse me, can I ask your name and title?" The female customer service representative has a very rigorous work attitude. The public mailbox of the space agency receives a lot of emails every day. In order to prevent someone from sending malicious files, there will be special people to classify the emails. Finally, after determining that the email is valuable, it will be pushed to the corresponding researchers. This process can also be regarded as a kind of protection for high-end talents. "My name is Mike, and I'm a high school student in Melford. Dr. Arnold came to our place to give an open class before." Mike said truthfully, "Okay, thank you for your call. We will solve your problem according to the correct process later. Please wait patiently." Hearing that the caller was a high school student, the female customer service representative hung up the phone politely. Listening to the busy tone on the phone, Mike was also depressed like Sheldon before. "How is it? What did the other party say?" little Sheldon asked anxiously after seeing Mike put down the phone. "The other party said that they would deal with our problem, but the attitude was perfunctory." Mike briefly described the situation just now. Obviously, the female customer service of the space agency may be connected with high-end talents such as masters and doctors every day. With the identity of Mike, a high school student, she still doesn't get enough attention from her. If we had known earlier, we should have asked for Dr. Arnold's private phone or private email. Little Sheldon felt annoyed after listening to Mike's story. Seeing that the other party was in a bad mood, Mike comforted him. "Wait a little longer. Maybe Dr. Arnold will reply to us soon." A correct version in 1619 book bar. "No, I can't go on like this," little Sheldon said firmly. "I have decided that before I get a reply, I will call every day to inquire about the situation." Obviously, this matter has become a demon in little Sheldon's heart. Great, I ate the mushroom on the other side. Missy, who was manipulating Mario to hit the mushroom, cheered happily. Obviously, human joys and sorrows are not the same. Not long after that, Grandma Connie also prepared dinner. After dinner, little Sheldon temporarily forgot about the unpleasantness of the previous phone call, and he and Missy studied computer games together. Missy, who has a lively personality, likes those small games that require operation. Little Sheldon, on the other hand, prefers puzzle online games. The two had a small argument for this. On the other side, Grandma Connie took her daughter to a quiet place to talk. Mary, I think you should learn to be more tolerant. After handing her daughter a bottle of beer, Grandma Connie continued, George had a bad time at work some time ago, and he may be a little emotional. But this situation will get better soon. In Grandma Connie's view, it is normal for a couple to have some small conflicts in their lives. As long as the couple is more tolerant, life will go on as before. No, it's not an emotional issue. He just doesn't care about the family anymore. Mary confided in her husband about what he had done wrong recently. Since George started working at the sporting goods store, he had been leaving home early and coming back late every day and had little time to spend alone with his wife. Moreover, the most critical point was that the salary George brought home could not keep up with the family expenses. Based on this situation, George, who was in a depressed mood, drank beer more and more frequently. In Mary's view, this was all irresponsible behavior. Chapter 137 Reconciliation. Without Mary's nagging, the Cooper family seemed very deserted. George was lying on the sofa, watching the football game and drinking beer, looking very comfortable. In his room, George, who was listening to rock music with the external speakers, felt the rare breath of freedom without Mary's control. However, soon George's stomach started to growl. He came to the living room and asked, Dad, what are we going to eat tonight? There is still some bread in the refrigerator. You can take care of it. George took a sip of beer and said casually. Seeing his father's current state, George didn't expect him to make dinner for him. He took out bread and sausage from the refrigerator, made 2 sandwiches, and came to the sofa. After handing his father a sandwich, George gnawed the cold food in his hand and began to miss the hot food in the past. Moreover, George, who understood some things, also felt that it was not good for his father and mother to quarrel. So, he carefully persuaded, Dad, go and apologize to Mom. She will forgive you. George didn't say anything after hearing his eldest son's persuasion. But when he saw that the other party wanted to secretly take the beer, George stopped him and said, Stop, you are not old enough to drink. The little action was discovered, and George said flatteringly, there are so many beers at home, it doesn't matter if I help you solve it. In order to resist his wife this time, George bought a lot of beer with 300 yuan, and the house was piled with beer. No, George answered decisively. He didn't want to see his eldest son become an alcoholic. Seeing that there was no room for negotiation, George put down the beer in his hand in disappointment. Then, he said, then let's continue the previous topic. When are you going to invite Mom back? On this issue, George's view was the same as that of Grandma Connie. He believed that his parents would reconcile sooner or later. For the sake of his stomach, George felt that he had to speed up the process. No, I'm not wrong this time, it's Mary who is wrong. George also began to complain about his wife's mistakes. Mary had previously neglected other people in the family because she paid too much attention to little Sheldon. This became even more obvious after she went to work at the church. After all, human energy is limited. It can also be said that George had a conflict with his wife this time because he wanted to get the other party's attention. Mary, who has a strong personality, now has a job in the church as an economic foundation, which makes George a little afraid that the other party will leave him. Of course, this situation is also because George has been very unhappy in work and life recently, which makes him feel unconfident. In other words, George is experiencing a midlife crisis. Listening to George's story, little George also discovered for the first time that his father is not easy. Life after marriage is too difficult, little George sighed. That's the fact. George nodded in agreement, and then he persuaded his son, little George, I think you need to be mature enough before finding a partner. It's good to get married after the age of 25. George took this opportunity to impart life experience to his eldest son. 25. Little George was now a little afraid of marriage because of his father. He thought for a while and said, "It doesn't seem difficult." "Very good," George said, while the iron was hot. "It's settled. If you can get married after the age of 25, I will give you $2,000. Hearing that there was such a large sum of money to be taken, little George said confidently, "Don't worry, I will take the $2,000. On the other side, Grandma Connie, who failed to persuade, has begun to allocate rooms for everyone to rest. Because this is an old house, there are only 2 rooms for rest. So Mary and Missy were assigned to Grandma Connie's room, and little Sheldon had to live with Mike. In this way, several days passed in a blink of an eye. Mary never went home, except to get a change of clothes. On the other hand, because of his bed recognition, little Sheldon was not used to living in Grandma Connie's house. In addition, he has been repeatedly rejected by NASA recently, which makes his condition look worse day by day. Then there was Grandma Connie. She had long been accustomed to living alone. Now that there were 2 people resting together in the room, she was not used to it. Grandma Connie, who had not slept well for several days, was getting worse day by day. On Friday night, at dinner time, Grandma Connie finally couldn't help it. She persuaded again. "Mary, when do you decide to go and make peace with George?" Grandma Connie originally thought that Mary was only coming to stay for 2 days, but who knew that she would stay for a week, which seriously interfered with her normal life. Mary heard the subtext of Grandma Connie's words and said disappointedly, "Are you going to drive us away too?" No, that's not what I mean." Seeing her daughter's sad expression, Grandma Connie quickly said, "You can stay as long as you want. I'm just worried that you and George lack communication and your relationship will get worse and worse." Read the correct version on the 16:9 book forum. On the other side, without Mary's control, Cooper's house has become a mess, with dirty clothes, smelly socks, and beer bottles thrown all over the floor. Feeling that he would go crazy if he continued like this, George put down the cold bread in his hand and persuaded, "Dad, I think it's time for you to apologize to Mom." George, who had a hard week, also missed his wife's kindness. He hesitated for a long time and said, "Okay, I'll go and invite them back." "Come on, Dad, for the sake of his stomach." George clenched his fist to encourage his father. George, who put on his coat and went out, happened to meet Mary on the road, who was about to go home to get a change of clothes. The couple looked at each other for a long time in tacit understanding, and then George spoke first. "How have you been recently?" "Just so." Mary thought of the many inconveniences of living at Grandma Connie's house and shook her head. Then, she asked, "How about you? I mean, how is George?" "We are not doing well." George also shook his head and said, "George misses the food you cook." "Of course, I miss the food you cook too." In fact, it was not only George who almost vomited after eating bread. George also felt the same way. At this moment, the couple, who had a strong emotional foundation, understood each other's intentions through eye contact. "The moonlight is so beautiful today. Do you want to go for a walk?" George invited. Of course, Mary looked at the dim moonlight in the sky and said with a smile. So, the middle-aged couple walked hand in hand in the moonlight. "Great, I can finally go home." Little Sheldon, who was observing the situation at the window, cheered when he saw his parents reconciled. "I'll go help you pack your luggage now." Grandma Connie, who also noticed the situation outside, said with a smile. Little Sheldon was happy because he could finally go home and have a good sleep. And Grandma Connie had the same reason as her little grandson. "Mike, can I come to play computer in the future?" Missy asked Mike reluctantly, feeling that they were about to part. If there was anyone who had the most comfortable life this week, it must be Missy. Not only did she have more time to spend with Mike every day, but she could also play games happily with him in his company. Chapter 138, Come to the Door. After the couple talked, under Mary's persuasion, George was willing to turn down the request for overtime work on weekends at the sporting goods store. On the one hand, it was because the intensity of the all-day work was a bit too much for him, and on the other hand, it was because of the salary issue. The sales job that was not proportional to the effort and had no development prospects made George more inclined to return to his family and spend more time with his children on weekends. After all, Mary's work at the church was the busiest on weekends, leaving her with no time to take care of Sheldon and others on weekends. After this talk, the couple temporarily found a balance between family and work. Time passed in a flash, and another week passed. During this week, Mike and Sheldon still did not receive a reply from Dr. Arnold, and even the call to NASA would be hung up by the female customer service in 1 second. Obviously, Mike and Sheldon had been unilaterally blocked by the female customer service of NASA. In this situation, Sheldon, who could not get effective communication, had gastrointestinal problems due to depression. Mary, who found that her youngest son was not in good health, also took him to the hospital. What did the doctor say? George, who was preparing dinner, asked with concern when he saw his wife and youngest son coming back. The situation is not very good. Mary shook her head and continued. The doctor said that Shell's stomach discomfort was caused by long-term depression. In this case, it is difficult for medicine to work. Indeed, in a case like Sheldon, you must first adjust yourself and solve the cause of your depression before the symptoms can be completely cured. Otherwise, if you only treat the stomach and intestines without solving the knot in your heart, the symptoms will easily recur. Why is this happening? Listening to his wife's explanation, George realized the seriousness of the problem. I don't know either. I asked Shelley the reason, but he refused to tell me. Mary felt distressed and helpless about her youngest son's current situation. She has decided to take him to see a psychologist tomorrow when she is free. Heart disease needs heart medicine, which is the best way Mary can think of. Just when the couple was anxious, Mike, who came with Grandma Connie to have dinner, said, "Maybe I know why Sheldon is sick." So, in the expectant eyes of George and his wife, Mike told them in detail the reasons and consequences of little Sheldon waiting for a reply from NASA. How could they do this? After hearing the reason why her youngest son was sick, Mary hugged him distressedly. After listening to Mike's story, the other people in the room also had indignation on their faces. Everyone saw the enthusiasm of little Sheldon when he wrote the plan before. This kind of feeling of paying great efforts, but not getting feedback can easily make people feel the same. After finding out the reason for his son's illness, George immediately expressed his willingness to stand up for the other party. So he called NASA to reprimand the other party for their improper behavior. "Hello, what can I do for you?" The phone was connected, and a crisp inquiry came from the receiver. Hearing that the other party was a lady, and so polite, George's anger was immediately reduced by half. He also politely replied, "Hello, I'm Sheldon's father. I want to ask." But before George could finish his words, the other party hung up the phone. Obviously, because of the harassment calls this week, the female customer service of the space agency has regarded all the calls about little Sheldon and Mike as harassment calls. George, who had not yet fully understood the situation, was a little confused. Then, under the gaze of his family, he still did not give up and called again. This time, the female customer service on the other side was more straightforward. After hearing George's familiar voice, she immediately hung up the phone. Now, there is one more person who was depressed by the female customer service. Seeing her husband frustrated, Mary, who did not believe in evil, immediately took the phone. "I'm Sheldon's mother. I want to ask you why you treat him like this. Your behavior has hurt the young mind and physical health of a child." As soon as the phone was connected, Mary started a round of output without waiting for the other party to speak. Beep, beep, beep. But the busy tone on the phone showed that Mary's words were not effectively conveyed to the other party. It may be that the moment she revealed her identity, the female customer service of the space agency hung up the phone. Mary felt like she had hit cotton with a punch, and she immediately became depressed. "Let me do it." Grandma Connie, who had rich life experience, said she wanted to try. "Hello, we sent a file to you before. Can you help me check it?" "Oh, my name is Connie, the name of the file. Wait a minute." Sure enough, Grandma Connie, who had more life experience, started a conversation with the other party. Then, she avoided the receiver, asked Mike the file name, and said to the receiver again, The file name is Rocket Launch Plan 2.0. Hello, are you still there? Grandma Connie listened to the busy tone in the receiver and looked confused. A correct version in 16,191 book 1 bar. Obviously, the female customer service was not only sensitive to the names of little Sheldon and Mike, but even the file name they passed was blacklisted. They are really too much. George saw that Grandma Connie was also hung up by the other party and suddenly understood why his youngest son was sick. So, he said, I happen to be free tomorrow. I decided to take Shirley to Houston in person and ask them for an explanation. George had already discussed with Dell, the owner of the sporting goods store, and got a weekend break by reducing his salary. Really? Hearing his father's words, Sheldon was happy. I'll go prepare the documents now. Sheldon was ready to organize the paper documents so that he could confront Dr. Arnold face to face tomorrow. Seeing that her youngest son had regained his former enthusiasm, Mary's expression also relaxed. God knows how worried she was when she walked out of the hospital today. Then, she thought of the annoying female customer service on the phone just now, and then she told her husband that, if he could see the other party tomorrow, he must help her vent. Obviously, because of her youngest son's matter, Mary was also dissatisfied with the female customer service of the NASA. Time came to Saturday morning, because Mike also had the right to sign the documents, so at the invitation of Sheldon, he also took a special car to the Houston NASA. After driving for most of the day, the car arrived at the gate of the Houston NASA. Looking at the tall building of the space agency, George felt guilty when he thought that the people working inside were all high-end talents. He even forgot his wife's instructions. He carefully tucked Sheldon and Mike into the gate, found the front desk and asked, "Hello, is Dr. Arnold here? Do you have an appointment?" asked the beautiful staff in work clothes at the front desk. It's this voice. Sheldon, who has a super memory, immediately recognized that the staff was the female customer service before. He said indignantly, "I'm Sheldon. We have had many calls before." The female customer service also reacted to the identities of the people in front of her. After all, there are not many people who insist on making harassing calls every day. You are Sheldon, so you must be Mike. The female customer service ignored George directly, and then looked at the handsome Mike next to her with a surprised face. "Yes, I'm Mike." Mike is very familiar with the other party's eyes. Many girls in school look like crazy, which is probably like this. "Can you help us transfer Dr. Arnold's private call? We know him." Mike smiled and said, "Yes, sure." The female customer service was dazzled by Mike's smile and agreed to the other party's request for some unknown reason. Chapter 139 Documentary. Not long after, Dr. Arnold, wearing a white coat as a researcher, came to the door. Mike. Dr. Arnold greeted from a distance. "Why are you here? Do you have any questions?" Obviously, Dr. Arnold misunderstood. He thought Mike came to learn from him. After all, before they parted last time, he had promised that Melford students could come to Houston for help. "Not really." Mike shook his head slightly and said, "This time it's mainly because Sheldon has something to ask you." Oh, the child with a very good memory. Dr. Arnold then looked at little Sheldon and said kindly with a smile, "Little friend, I remember you." Listening to Dr. Arnold's tone, little Sheldon realized that the other party still treated him as a child. So he tightened his little face and glared at the other party with dissatisfaction. But little Sheldon's dissatisfaction was all like throwing it to a blind man. Dr. Arnold ignored him and communicated with George, who came over for a few words and then took the three to his office. After asking his assistant to serve drinks to the three people, Dr. Arnold asked, "Now, can you tell me the purpose of your visit?" Little Sheldon was waiting for this moment. He took out the prepared documents, put them in front of the other party and said, "This is the Rocket Launch Plan 2.0. Please take a look. Interesting." Dr. Arnold looked at little Sheldon's serious look and his attitude became much more serious. Regarding his professional field, Dr. Arnold carefully looked through the documents. "Oh, what a genius design." Dr. Arnold, who was checking the documents, slowly showed a surprised expression on his face. After he finished looking through all the contents, there was only an expression of admiration on his face. "Mike, is this completed by you and Sheldon?" "In fact, this is a plan that Sheldon completed independently. I just made some references," Mike said truthfully. Little Sheldon on the side raised his chin proudly. "It's really surprising." Dr. Arnold looked at little Sheldon and said, "I take back my previous contempt for you. You are a very special child. I accept your apology." Little Sheldon got what he wanted and felt very happy. Even the discomfort in his stomach disappeared. Then, he was about to call his father and Mike to leave after he had settled his mind. "Wait, Sheldon. There are many places in this plan that I don't understand. Can you tell me about it?" When it comes to professional fields, Dr. Arnold showed his rigorous side. Of course, little Sheldon stood up proudly and came to the only small blackboard in the office, pretending to be a deputy teacher. "If you have any questions, you can ask them." Then, time passed slowly as the two asked and answered each other. In the meantime, Mike was also asked about the multi-stage propulsion theory and the thruster recovery plan. After all, these two advanced theories were first proposed by him. On the side, George, who was watching the three people's intense discussion, couldn't get a word in. So, he could only refill himself with 2 cups of black tea. Don't mention it, the tea at the space agency tastes better than outside. Finally, more than 2 hours later, Dr. Arnold, who had fully understood the rocket launch plan 2.0, showed a complicated look on his face. "Your plan is very good and helped us solve many technical problems. But again, the whole plan is too advanced. Now if we want to fully implement it, we still can't meet your requirements in many technical and material aspects." Dr. Arnold said regretfully, "You know, for professionals, it's very torturous to encounter a better plan, but fail to implement it. But fortunately, Sheldon studied this plan just to prove that he could do it and didn't consider putting it into production. And now that he can make Dr. Arnold admire him, he is already very satisfied." Mike on the other side didn't care that much about the failure of the plan. He said, "It doesn't matter, I have applied for a patent for this plan. When the conditions are met, someone will naturally notice it. In fact, this plan can be a win-win situation. Mike and Sheldon Jr. provided the space agency with a direction to move forward, and when the space technology conditions met the standards, the two could also collect patent fees from the space agency. You are doing the right thing." Dr. Arnold thought for a moment and understood Mike's idea and couldn't help but sigh at his maturity. "Okay, we should go." George, who had drunk several cups of tea on the side, saw that the situation was almost done and prepared to take Sheldon Jr. and Mike away. This mission was thus successfully completed. After George's reminder, Dr. Arnold realized that it was getting late outside, so he proposed, "As a thank you, please allow me to treat you to dinner." "No," George refused. "Next we have to find a place to stay, and we are a little late. Let's have dinner next time." Obviously, George was just being polite now, and the three of them might not have the chance to meet Ronald again after leaving the space agency. However, the problem of finding a place to stay that George mentioned was real. That's a pity. Dr. Arnold also took into account the difficulties of several people, but in order to compensate Sheldon and Mike, he finally took out 2 movie tickets reluctantly and said, "As a thank you, please accept these 2 movie tickets. A correct version in 1619 book bar. Midnight show." Mike got the movie ticket and saw the time on it. It was today's midnight show. Mars exploration? Is this a science and education film? Little Sheldon noticed the content of the movie ticket. "Yes, I heard that this is precious information taken inside the space agency," Dr. Arnold explained. Hearing that it was an alien science and education film, little Sheldon became interested. After saying goodbye to Dr. Arnold, George skillfully found the small hotel where he stayed last time. After checking in, he took Sheldon and Mike out for a big meal. For this trip, Mary prepared sufficient funds for George. When the time came to midnight, following the instructions of the movie ticket, George drove Sheldon and Mike to a remote private cinema. Why do I feel something is wrong? After leaving the main road, without the illumination of streetlights, George felt uneasy looking at the dark scene outside the car window. However, seeing his youngest son's enthusiastic appearance, George still chose to get off the car and took Sheldon and Mike to the only cinema with lights on. The front is private territory. No unauthorized persons are allowed to enter without a certificate. At the only entrance of the cinema, two strong men blocked the way of Mike and the other two. Is that it? Mike raised the movie ticket in his hand. After seeing the movie ticket, the two strong men's attitude became much better, but they still said in a business-like manner, "You only have 2 tickets, so only 2 people can go in." Without waiting for Mike to reply, George pulled the 2 people around him to the side. "I feel bad here, why don't we leave?" George persuaded. He just saw the muscles of the 2 strong men, which are not something that ordinary people can train. Obviously, this private cinema is not simple. "I don't think there is any problem. Look over there." The Mars exploration science and education film has a strong attraction to little Sheldon. Looking in the direction of his finger, there was a luxury car parked on the side of the road, and a well-dressed old man successfully entered the cinema with a movie ticket in hand. Chapter 140 Octopus Alien. Watching the old man dressed like a successful person enter the cinema, George finally felt relieved. "Mike, help keep an eye on Sherry for a while. I'll wait for you in the car." George finally agreed to his youngest son's request to watch the science and education film. But looking at his appearance, he was not completely relieved. This is normal. No one would let their children go alone in such a strange place in the middle of the night. Fortunately, Mike was with him this time. "Okay, I will take good care of Sheldon." Mike understood the other party's concerns and made a guarantee. Although he didn't know what the situation was in the cinema, with Mike's current physique, he was confident that he could deal with some emergencies. Besides, the movie tickets were given by Doctor on all this time, so there shouldn't be any big problems. After checking the tickets again, Mike and the others successfully entered the cinema. The theater was not very big, and the number of people was not large, only about 20 or so. Maybe because everyone didn't know each other, there was no one chatting in the theater, and it seemed very quiet. Little Sheldon didn't feel much about it. He took Mike all the way to the middle seat in the front row and sat down. "Hey, buddy, why did you bring a kid here?" Not long after Mike sat down, a young man wearing a black hoodie came over and asked. Seeing Mike's gaze, the young man smiled and expressed his goodwill, then whispered, "My name is Colin, and I'm a freelancer." "Mike, I'm a high school student now." Mike also briefly introduced himself. Through facial expressions, Mike found that, after he introduced his identity, the young man opposite him showed a momentary surprise on his face. "Is there anything wrong with my identity?" Mike asked immediately. "There is no problem with my identity, but you are too young." Colin organized his words and said, "Most of the people who can receive invitations here are successful people in various fields. For example, the old man over there is a double doctor of physics and biology from Harvard." Following the direction indicated by the other party, Mike saw the old man who came in before them. Moreover, as Mike waited and watched, he found that most of the more than 20 people present were over 30 years old and were well dressed. Obviously, their identities were not simple. Colin, who was in his 20s and wearing a hoodie, looked a bit like a homeboy. He was probably not as innocent as he looked. "Can you tell me about the situation here?" Mike asked with his eyes back. "Didn't you do some research before you came?" Colin's surprised expression was very obvious this time. Then, he looked back and forth at Mike and Sheldon, and continued to ask, "Where did you get the tickets?" "Someone gave them to me," Mike replied. "No wonder you would bring your children to participate in this kind of party." Colin looked like he understood. Those who can enter this kind of private cinema are all invited by the owner of this place to get movie tickets directly, and they are also targeted at specific successful people. People like Mike and Sheldon, who look very young and don't have much achievements, generally don't receive invitations. But after listening to Mike's explanation, Colin also figured it out. It might be an accident that Mike and the other two were able to come to this kind of party. After thinking for a while, Colin also briefly talked about what he knew. It turns out that small gatherings like this initiated with movie tickets have happened before. And according to the information on the internet, this kind of gathering is very mysterious. It is difficult for outsiders to understand the true situation of the party. Colin's other identity is a computer hacker. He was very curious after learning about this kind of party from the internet. After receiving the invitation this time, he was excited for a while. Moreover, the purpose of his coming this time was probably to reveal a secret. Just when Mike was about to learn more about the situation, a middle-aged man in a white coat walked to the front. "I'm Francis, a researcher at NASA. I'm honored to invite you all to come." Francis stated his identity. Mike also found that the white coat he was wearing was indeed the work clothes of the NASA Research Institute. However, the light ball that Mike grabbed in his hand, acting +10, made him realize that things might not be that simple. Yes, this light ball fell from Francis on the stage. After Francis on the stage briefly introduced himself, he smiled and continued, "Humanity may not be alone. What you will see next should subvert your cognition." Stay tuned as he finished speaking. The lights in the theater dimmed. Then, a projection was projected on the front screen. Mars is one of the 8 planets in the solar system, the 4th planet from the inside to the outside of the solar system, and a terrestrial planet. The orange-red crust shows that it has rich hematite on its surface. With the popular science voice, an exploration robot's perspective showed everyone the scenery on Mars. Is it just normal science education? Colin looked at the audio and video playback, and was obviously not very satisfied with this situation. You know, he came here this time to make a big news. A correct version of the 16-9 book bar. Little Sheldon on the side, however, was watching very seriously. Just when Mike thought he was being suspicious, the picture on the screen suddenly shook, and then a huge tentacle suddenly passed in front of the camera. Oh, wow, this sudden situation caused a burst of exclamations in the theater. This is not computer synthesis. Colin stared at the screen intently, as if he wanted to see something more from it. Little Sheldon on the side, however, showed a look of surprise on his face. Then the screen turned around, showing the full appearance of the owner of the tentacle, which was a huge octopus monster. This octopus monster seemed to have a high level of intelligence. When it found that the robot was filming itself, it stretched out a tentacle again and filmed the robot into pieces. The picture finally stopped at the hideous head of the octopus monster. "It's incredible, the octopus aliens really exist," Little Sheldon muttered absent-mindedly. "It's really incredible," Colin also exclaimed in amazement. From his professional perspective, the pictures on the screen are all real. In other words, aliens really exist. This is really a scene that subverts cognition. Although there are not many pictures of the octopus monster, it still gave everyone in the theater a great shock. The discussion gradually became louder. Quiet just as everyone was discussing fiercely, the lights in the theater suddenly lit up. Francis walked onto the stage and looked at the expressions of the people below the stage, seeming to be very satisfied. Then he said, "As you can see, we are not alone. Aliens really exist, and not only in outer space. As far as I know, there are many aliens living on Earth, and they have rich camouflage technology lurking among humans." If Francis had said this at the beginning, he might have been considered a madman. But with the video as evidence, his words became very convincing. Chapter 141, Chameleon. As Francis explained, panic gradually emerged in the theater. Even little Sheldon couldn't help but worry that the Earth would be invaded by aliens. After all, the impact of the octopus monster was too strong. The only one who could calm down at the scene was Mike. He had been mentally prepared for aliens since he met the men in black. And as far as Mike knew, aliens were not that scary. After they came to the Earth, they still needed to abide by the rules here. And Francis's behavior at this moment was tantamount to deliberately creating panic. This was indeed the case. As the vanguard of the chameleons, Francis' goal was to create chaos on the Earth, so as to prepare for his own tribe to invade the Earth. As for the reason why the chameleons invaded the Earth, it can only be said that the Earth has perfect conditions for the survival of organisms, which will inevitably make alien tribes living in harsh environments spy on it. Seeing the reactions of the people below, Francis was very satisfied. His goal had been achieved. It can be imagined that when these people who have a lot of say in different fields leave here, they will definitely cause a lot of chaos. "Okay, this is the end of the movie. You can leave now," Francis said with a smile. Seeing many people muttering aliens and octopus monsters in their mouths, Mike felt that something was wrong. After a little thought, he probably guessed what Francis wanted to do. However, it seems that this kind of problem is not yet the turn of a little person like him to deal with. His main task now is to send little Sheldon away safely. As for that Francis, it is better to leave it to professionals to deal with. It has to be said that Mike has a very clear understanding of himself. And from another perspective, aliens have existed for many years, since they didn't make any big noise before. This time, Francis' conspiracy should not succeed. After all, organizations like the Men in Black are not vegetarians. Thinking of this in his heart, Mike pulled little Sheldon, who was in a daze, and prepared to leave with the crowd. It can be seen that this movie viewing has a great impact on little Sheldon's cognition. Just as everyone was about to leave, the door of the theater was broken open from the outside. Two people in black suits walked in. "Excuse me, everyone please go back to your seats, okay?" The leading man in black blocked everyone's way. Seeing the giant portable cannon in the hands of the man in black, there was a panic at the scene. Then, everyone returned to their original seats. They actually have plasma weapons. Little Sheldon still had time to study the equipment of the man in black. It can be said that the things that happened one after another tonight have almost made little Sheldon numb. They should be the personnel who deal with special events. There is information about them on the internet. It turns out that these are all true. Colin on the side had a huge look of surprise on his face, as if he had dug up some big news. Obviously, this hacker may have thought of putting what happened tonight on the internet to attract more people's attention. Chameleon fugitive, I'm arresting you for spreading panic. What else do you have to say? After controlling the situation, the leading man in black came to Francis. The chameleon who pretended to be Francis was unlucky. After the door of such a small theater was blocked, he had no place to hide. I don't know what you are talking about. Francis adjusted his coat and said calmly, I'm Francis, a researcher at NASA. You have no right to arrest me. Still pretending, the leading black man raised his weapon and said, the real Francis has been sent to the hospital. You are now charged with intentional injury. Get ready to spend the rest of your life in a space prison. As he said that, the black man was about to take off the handcuffs and arrest the alien. Damn black man, don't even think about catching me. Realizing that he had been exposed, Francis, who didn't want to sit and wait for death, knocked the weapon in front of him crooked and wrestled with a black man opposite. Then, after a dazzling fight, two identical black men appeared on the scene. On the other side, the younger brother of the man in black who was about to help was in a dilemma. He raised the atomic number 4 pistol and asked, who is the leader among you? I'm X2. Two identical men in black spoke at the same time, and even their voices were exactly the same. The chameleons are, just as their name suggests, they have the talent of chameleons, and can disguise themselves as anyone through transformation and imitation. Looking at the two people in front of him who are exactly the same in size and voice, the younger brother of the man in black hesitated for a long time again and said, how about this? You tell me a secret of your own to prove your identity. Obviously, the younger brother of the man in black wanted to use this method to distinguish the true from the false. Of course, whether there is any personal selfishness in it, outsiders don't know. Just when the two identical men in black showed tangled colors on their faces, Mike in the front row below shouted, the one on the left is a fake shooting plus 66, physique main attribute plus 3, fighting plus 88, acting plus 100, imitation plus 50. Through the attributes picked up in his hand, Mike can easily tell who is the alien. Moreover, there is an even simpler way to distinguish the real from the fake. Even if the fake black-clad man can imitate the other party, the weapon in his hand will definitely not be real. In this case, as long as two identical black-clad men shoot each other, even the arrest process can be saved. A correct version of the book in 1619. Of course, this situation is only suitable as a trump card. After all, judging from the performance of the black-clad men before, they obviously want to capture the color-changing alien alive. This behavior is likely to be an attempt to extract some information from the alien. After being reminded by Mike, the two real black-clad men also joined forces to surround the fake black-clad man on the left. Don't even think about it. The color-changing alien also found that the black-clad man did not dare to shoot casually, so he squeezed out of the encirclement and rushed to the crowd below. With the green light flashing on his body, the chameleon kept changing his appearance and mixed with the people who came to watch the movie. Seeing the chameleon change into other people's appearance in front of their eyes, the people below shouted monster while hiding everywhere. This situation, however, provided better cover for the chameleon. Now, the two men in black who lost their clear target were dumbfounded. On the other side, the timid little Sheldon also ran around and got separated from Mike in this chaotic situation. Sheldon Mike had no choice but to shout to the other party, "I'm here X" to the two little Sheldons spoke at the same time and then looked at each other with horror at the same time. Mike, who had already locked onto the identity of the fake Sheldon, shook his head speechlessly. However, for the safety of the real Sheldon, he did not immediately guess the other party, but still called out, "Come here." So, the two little Sheldons ran towards Mike at the same time. After Mike grabbed the real Sheldon's hand, he kicked the other little Sheldon away. "How did you recognize me?" The chameleon flew backwards, knocking over a chair, and revealed his true form, which was a giant chameleon. At this moment, it also recognized that Mike was the one who had exposed its identity before. "Want to know?" Mike smiled and said, "I won't tell you." At the same time, Mike got several more light balls in his hand. Acting plus 666, imitation plus 100, intelligence plus 3. Of course, the intelligence attribute is obtained from the real Sheldon. Chapter 142 Memory Eraser. Arsehole. Seeing the playful expression on Mike's face, the chameleon said angrily, "You asked for it." As he spoke, the chameleon opened his mouth and a thin and long tongue shot out like a javelin. In addition to camouflage, the chameleon's talent is their tongue. The strange structure makes their tongue their strongest weapon. It is confusing and very suitable for sneak attacks. It's disgusting with his extraordinary reaction speed. Mike grabbed the tongue in front of him, but the sticky feeling on his hand made him frown. Seeing that the slippery tongue in his hand was about to break free, Mike, who was disgusted, also became ruthless. After wrapping the tongue around his hand, he exerted force with both arms and stalemate with the opponent. Hiss. Bang. With the sound of muscle tearing, the chameleon's tongue was pulled to the limit and finally broke in the middle. Mike threw away the half of the tongue in his hand with disgust, and then wiped his hands on the chair beside him. On the other side, the chameleon, who had lost his support, collapsed on the ground in pain, constantly using his front paws to pull out the remaining half of his tongue in his mouth. Things developed too quickly, and the two men in black did not expect that the chameleon would be solved so easily. When they rushed over with their weapons, the other party had obviously lost its combat effectiveness. When the two men passed by, they both looked at Mike in surprise. Then, they stepped forward at the same time to control the chameleon. My tongue. I want to accuse you Earthlings of treating alien races barbarously. I want to complain." The chameleon, who had lost half of his tongue, had a muffled voice. "Shut up." The leading man in black punched the chameleon a few times. After the other party was honest, he took out a mask-like thing and sealed his mouth. Obviously, in order to capture this alien criminal, the Men in Black organization had already prepared. Moreover, the Men in Black organization is not a charity organization, and it is even more impossible to talk about democracy with the offending aliens. If this chameleon was not still useful, it would have probably turned into ashes by now. After the chameleon who was causing trouble was completely controlled, he was escorted away by the Men in Black. The black-clad man who had led the group was left at the scene to deal with the aftermath. Seeing that the crisis was resolved, the people who came to watch the movie all breathed a sigh of relief. Then, after escaping the disaster, they also had many questions in their minds. "Excuse me, which law enforcement agency do you belong to? And what crime did the alien just now commit?" Colin, who quickly accepted the existence of aliens, raised his doubts. "Mib. People usually call us Men in Black." The man in black who stayed behind looked very easy to talk to, and then he continued to explain, "The chameleons just now are trying to create panic among the civilians. They probably want to prepare for their tribe to invade the earth." Chameleons. I see. No wonder the monster just now looks like a mutant chameleon. Didn't you notice the point? The earth is going to be invaded. If the earth is invaded, what should we do? With the explanation of the man in black, everyone at the scene learned a lot of knowledge that they didn't know before. The news of the alien invasion of the earth also caused a lot of panic among the crowd again. Everyone calm down. The number of chameleons is not large. Even if they all come to the earth, our black organization can deal with it. Seeing that the panic is spreading, the man in black who stayed behind also patiently comforted everyone. The real threat to the earth is those alien insect creatures with a large number. As for the chameleons, their evolution is not complete and their number is not large enough. How can they invade the earth with only a tongue as a weapon? On the front battlefield, a few plasma cannons could wipe them out. As the black-clad man explained, everyone calmed down. Then, they had more questions. Little boy who raised his hand, do you have any questions? The black-clad man asked. Among the messy adults, the 9-year-old Sheldon stood out. Yes, sir. I want to ask where your high-tech weapons were developed. Little Sheldon asked politely. Little Sheldon had discovered before that the plasma weapons in the hands of the black people were absolutely ahead of all the existing weapons in the world. Just looking at the cool appearance, it is not comparable to ordinary weapons. There is a correct version in the 16:9 book forum. What are you talking about? The black-clad man raised the large weapon in his hand and introduced. This is a portable cannon. The full name is 3-barrel plasma cannon. It is produced by the weapons department of the black-clad man. After explaining, the black-clad man saw that little Sheldon wanted to ask more questions. Then, he said in a low voice, feeling annoyed, why should I tell you so much? You will all forget about what happened here in a while anyway. Previously, the man in black was in the mood to communicate with everyone, because he saw that the mission was successfully completed without any danger. However, as the questions from everyone increased, he became a little impatient. After all, there were colleagues waiting for him outside to hand in the tasks together. The man in black, who stopped answering everyone's questions, took out a pair of black sunglasses from his arms and put them on, then raised the pen-shaped memory eraser in his hand, adjusted the time, and said, please look here. As a burst of blue light flashed. Everyone at the scene seemed to be hypnotized, with a dazed look on their faces. Seeing that everyone quieted down, the man in black breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he put away the memory eraser and said, nothing happened before. There were no aliens, and no giant lizards. You just watched an ordinary private movie. After I leave, you can go back to your homes. After making up a logical memory for everyone, the man in black hurriedly left the theater. After the men in black left, everyone returned to normal. Hey, the movie just now was really good. Colin seemed to have forgotten the purpose of his trip. Later, he asked in confusion, by the way, what movie did I just watch? The situation of everyone at the scene was similar to Colin. After all, the men in black just made up a piece of non-existent memory for everyone, and the details in it were naturally not taken into account. Mike, what happened just now? Why do I feel that there is a blank in my memory? Little Sheldon, who has an image memory method, is very sensitive to memory. Nothing. The movie is over. We should leave. Mike didn't explain much. Aliens are not something that little Sheldon should be exposed to now. Even Mike himself is not going to delve into this matter at this stage. Did I fall asleep before? It shouldn't be. Little Sheldon, who was walking out behind Mike, had a depressed look on his face. You know, he came here for the name of science and education films before. Now he only remembers that he watched science and education films, but he can't remember the content at all. This discovery naturally made young Sheldon very distressed. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143, Learning a Musical Instrument. Hey, George. Wake up. Outside the private cinema, Mike knocked on the car window. How did I fall asleep? George got up from the steering wheel in a daze and opened the door to let Mike and the others in. I remember I was worried about you guys before. How could I fall asleep? George tried to recall what happened before. Judging from his current situation, he might have been brainwashed by the man in black. Otherwise, based on the movement in the theater just now, he would not have had any impression. Forget it. I hope you can come back safely. George didn't dwell on the things he couldn't figure out. Then, he turned to look at his youngest son and changed the topic to a lighter one. "Shelly, how was this science and education film? In fact, I don't remember what I've seen before." Little Sheldon shrugged and said helplessly, "Well, you might have been too tired before and fell asleep in the theater." George found an excuse that he didn't believe. Based on his understanding of his youngest son, it was impossible for him to fall asleep while watching a science and education film. The father and son both had unknown conditions at the same time, which was very strange to think about. Looking at the dark night outside the car window and the sound of insects from time to time in the distance, George felt that this place was very weird. So, he pretended to be calm and said, "Let's go back to the hotel and rest early." Then the car started smoothly and drove towards the small hotel. When they came to the bustling area with street lights, George's fear was mostly dispelled. After calming down, he asked tentatively, "Mike, do you remember what movie you watched before?" "Mars Exploration, a very ordinary alien science and education film." Mike briefly narrated the previous science and education film. Of course, he ignored the clip about the octopus alien. Listening to Mike's narration, George's uneasy heart gradually stabilized. Then, the three returned to the small hotel to rest for a night and returned to the town of Telford on Sunday afternoon. Seeing that the youngest son went out, he seemed to have untied the knot in his heart. Mary also expressed her affirmation of her husband's efforts. On the other hand, after the trip to Houston, NASA, Mike's life was back on track again. By tearing off the tongue of the chameleon, Mike also acquired a very useful skill tongue. 2 weeks passed like this. During this time, Mike also intentionally or unintentionally followed the posts of aliens on the internet. Although he did not intend to participate in it, it would not hurt to know more about this kind of thing. Sure enough, many people who were suspected of participating in the private cinema appeared on the internet. However, those who participated in the process of watching the movie seemed to be unable to explain it. Obviously, the black-clad men did a good job in strictly controlling the news of aliens. But the situation on the internet also indirectly showed that it was not only Francis who wanted to spread panic among the people. The earth seems to be very unsafe. But I believe that the black-clad men and other organizations can deal with it. Mike did not have the idea of breaking his peaceful life because of the news on the internet. Being in different positions naturally requires different things to consider. This is also a little life experience summed up by Mike. On the other side of the school, Sheldon, who had learned the knowledge of high school Olympiad mathematics in a very short time, had already thought about leaving the Olympiad team and looking for his new interest. His smart brain gave him a strong learning ability, which is a gift and also a trouble. People who learn everything easily will easily fall into boredom when they have no goals. This is probably the case with little Sheldon now. At dinner time, when Mike and Grandma Connie went to Cooper's house, they heard little Sheldon playing the violin from a distance. Yes, little Sheldon is ready to bring his talent to the field of music. "Sheldon, the violin you play is like sawing wood. It's noise." Little George expressed strong dissatisfaction with little Sheldon's new hobbies. "I'm exploring," little Sheldon explained. "Einstein is a piano lover, Stephen Hawking is a harmonica player, and Charles Bolden is proficient in almost all instruments. So, studies have shown that smart people like music. I'm now getting closer to those great people." Dog little George was not impressed by his brother's speech. He only knew that the other party's behavior of playing the violin was annoying and seriously hurt his ears. When seeing Mike coming, George retorted as if he saw a savior. "Mike is also a smart man. Why doesn't he learn a musical instrument?" Little Sheldon wanted to say that Mike was not as smart as himself. After a long period of contact, little Sheldon also keenly discovered that Mike was not as smart as himself in terms of IQ. The other party's profound knowledge was more based on rich knowledge accumulation. However, until now, little Sheldon has never defeated Mike head-on in terms of knowledge. Even in the knowledge of high school Olympiad mathematics, the two only tied. Yes, Mike has now reviewed all the knowledge points of high school Olympiad mathematics. And with no wrong answers, he also got a promise from teacher Sharon that he would not have to join the school of the Olympiad team. So in this case, little Sheldon couldn't say for sure that Mike was not a smart person. "Mike, are you interested in the violin?" I can teach you. Little Sheldon changed his mind. Since he couldn't prove that Mike was not a smart person, he would prove from the opposite side that smart people like music. Check out the correct version on the 16 to 9 book forum. Thank you. I have no plans to learn a musical instrument for the time being. Mike politely rejected Sheldon's kindness. Then, when he passed by Sheldon, he grabbed a large ball of light from him. Absolute pitch, the ability to identify/give the pitch of a musical instrument or the surrounding environment in the absence of a reference sound. God knows why Sheldon, who has absolute pitch, plays such a bad violin. After seeing Mike's refusal, George got excited. He said proudly, "See, Mike doesn't like music." He wanted to prove that smart people don't necessarily like music. Sheldon didn't agree with George's ridicule. Mike just said that he didn't want to learn a musical instrument for the time being, but he didn't say that he didn't like music. You're changing the concept. After Sheldon forced an explanation, he set up the violin again, playing it while saying, "Music is the bridge from human beings to the soul. It can keep me at peace." Just as Sheldon was making a convincing argument, George leaned out of the kitchen and asked loudly, "Did you hear that? Who is sawing wood? The sound is so loud, squeak, squeak." Sheldon was questioned again, and the action of playing the violin in his hand stopped. Then, he put the violin aside in annoyance. The soul, the bridge. Seeing that Sheldon had given up his dream of music, George laughed and said something sarcastic, as if he had won a battle. "You won't understand my pursuit of art," Sheldon said angrily, and then ignored George. In the kitchen on the other side, Mary glared at her husband and asked with dissatisfaction, "Why did you say that about Shelley? Don't you think so too?" George replied meaningfully. In fact, Sheldon's violin playing had been going on for several days. Mary, who had been listening to the noise for several days, could no longer bear it. If George had not persuaded Sheldon to stop playing the violin, Mary would probably have taken action. It was because the sound of Sheldon's violin was so unpleasant. After hearing her husband's answer, Mary smiled knowingly and did not continue the topic. That embarrassed her youngest son. Chapter 144 Drama Performance. Little Sheldon, whose musical dream was shattered, soon turned his attention to the school's drama club. He won the praise of his drama teacher, Mr. Andy, with an emotional monologue from King Lear. "Sheldon, I have never seen such a talented little actor as you." Randy excitedly stood up in the rehearsal room and invited, "Welcome to our team." Little Sheldon, who was praised, tilted his head slightly with a smug look on his face. In any case, drama is also a kind of art. Little Sheldon, who gave up his musical dream, has not given up his pursuit of art. Then Mr. Sheldon, are you willing to participate in our next performance as the protagonist? Mr. Andy asked with interest. The drama club has a large-scale stage performance every month, and now there are less than 3 weeks to the next performance. It has never happened before that a newcomer can take on the important task of the protagonist in such a short time. It can be said that Mr. Andy is really optimistic about little Sheldon's talent in drama. Of course, if you need it. Being valued by others made little Sheldon feel very accomplished. Finally, he asked, "What is the play we are going to perform next time, Annie?" 3 weeks passed quickly, and in a blink of an eye it was time for the drama club to perform publicly. "Why do I have to come to school on Saturday?" Little George complained dissatisfiedly as he walked into the campus. Yes, the drama club's performance was on the weekend, and the venue was in the school's large conference room. Most of the audience who came to watch were drama enthusiasts living nearby, and the other part was parents who came to support their children's performances. The Cooper family belonged to the second type, and Grandma Connie and Mike were also forcibly invited to watch little Sheldon's first drama performance. This time watching the drama performance was also a small family collective activity for the Cooper family. "Mike, do you think Sheldon will play a tree today?" Missy talked to Mike happily. In fact, Missy didn't care what little Sheldon played. Being able to stay with Mike on the weekend made the little girl very happy. You know, under normal circumstances, Mike's weekend time is mostly occupied by girls like Katie. "It shouldn't be that bad." Mike, who rarely has free time, said, "I heard that Sheldon's role this time is very important." Without waiting for Missy to talk again, Grandma Connie, who was traveling with him, smiled and said, "Actually, I have exclusive news here. Shelley will be on stage as the protagonist this time." It's said that little Sheldon is close to Grandma Connie. In order to hone his acting skills during this period, he has asked his grandmother for advice on acting many times. And Grandma Connie also got some inside information about the performance from her little grandson. In fact, Grandma Connie, who knows some of the chaotic situations in the entertainment industry, is very pessimistic about little Sheldon joining the drama club. However, seeing that her little grandson worked so hard for the performance, Grandma Connie still showed a supportive attitude. Sheldon is going to play the protagonist. How is it possible? Little George, who heard the inside news, questioned. You know, under normal circumstances, people who can play the protagonist on the stage of a drama need long-term acting skills. Okay, stop talking. We are here. When she arrived at the door of the school's conference room, Mary stopped her eldest son's nagging and said, "Anyway, we'll know the truth in a while." The school's conference room, which can seat more than 500 people, was now half full. The Cooper family found a good viewing position in the front row without much trouble. Backstage, little Sheldon, who was preparing for the performance, became more and more nervous as the performance time approached. He was wearing a nanny skirt, holding a purple red wig in his hand, and looked at Mr. Andy in embarrassment. "Can I not wear this wig? It makes me feel very uncomfortable." Little Sheldon asked. No, this is just a prop, you need it," Mr. Andy said, and walked up to help the other party put on the shoulder-length wig. Then, he walked around little Sheldon to admire him and praised him. "Perfect, you are the Annie in my heart." Little Sheldon, who was more than 9 years old, had not yet begun to show male characteristics. With a white and tender little face, he looked like a cute little girl after some dressing up. This also just meets the needs of little Anna's identity. Okay, looking at the admiring expressions of many actors next to him, little Sheldon accepted his new image. Then, while waiting for the performance, he was inevitably disturbed by the noisy sound of the front desk. Then, he came to the curtain and carefully lifted a corner to look out. The densely packed audience in the audience instantly caused little Sheldon's panic disorder to break out. "Sheldon, what's wrong with you?" Mr. Andy, who was paying attention to the situation backstage, found that something was wrong with little Sheldon. I can't do it." Little Sheldon, who was shaking all over, even stuttered when he spoke. "Relax, Sheldon, it's nothing." Mr. Andy understood very well what little Sheldon, who had not received orthodox actor training, needed now. So, he continued in an encouraging voice, "Liberating nature is a compulsory course for actors. Just think of the audience below as cabbages. A correct version in the 16 to 9 book and bar. Cabbage?" After the other party's comfort, little Sheldon calmed down a little. But when he thought about performing in front of so many strangers, he was at a loss and said, No, I still can't do it." Little Sheldon took off his wig, and his forehead was covered with sweat, because he was too nervous. At this moment, as the drama club's performance time arrived, a female announcer walked onto the stage, and began to announce, "Next, please enjoy the drama performance brought to you by the drama club." The play is Annie. With the sparse applause from the scene, the Cooper family all showed surprised expressions. "Annie? Connie, are you sure Shelley is the protagonist of this play?" Mary asked with wide eyes. "I don't know, it should be," Grandma Connie answered uncertainly. The play Annie is widely circulated in the United States, and almost everyone knows that the protagonist of this play is a woman. When Mary thought about her little son dressing up as a little girl, she felt a little uncomfortable. Maybe I remembered it wrong. Seeing her daughter's unhappiness, Grandma Connie immediately explained one more sentence. Of course, Grandma Connie was praying in her heart that her little grandson would never be the protagonist. Little George and Missy, on the other hand, were full of expectations for Sheldon's female clothing. Even Mike was rarely interested. The combination of the two words Sheldon and female clothing is very dramatic. The performance on the stage has also begun. As the play Annie progresses, it is finally the turn of the protagonist Annie to appear. "Oh, it's so cold, my sheep." With the rough lines, Mr. Andy, who is bloated, appeared on the stage wearing that funny purple red wig. He used all his strength to try to play a poor shepherd girl. But his tall figure does not match the thin and pitiful shepherd girl at all, which only makes people feel hot. In Texas, where male chauvinism prevails, Mr. Andy's current behavior can be regarded as very dedicated and courageous. By the way, what are my next lines? Mr. Andy, who had not experienced any prior rehearsal, took advantage of the opportunity to move, bent down and whispered to the actor dressed as a lamb for help. Chapter 145 College Pen Pals. In the audience, accompanied by waves of booing, Missy said with disdain, "Oh, my god. I saw Anna's leg hair." It must be said that, although Mr. Andy is very dedicated, he is really not suitable to play Annie. I have wanted to say it for a long time. Some actors often make bold moves to catch people's attention. Showing leg hair is already good. Grandma Connie, who has prejudices against the acting industry, took the opportunity to briefly popularize science, and then said thankfully, "Fortunately my little grandson didn't go on stage." The Cooper couple on the side also looked thankful at this time. It is hard for them to imagine how socially deadly it would be if little Sheldon went on stage to play Annie. "Little George, don't you feel disgusted?" Mike, who avoided the performance, didn't understand the behavior of little George next to him. "I think it's quite interesting," little George sighed, while watching the eye-catching performance on the stage with relish. "As long as you are happy." Mike shook his head and helped Missy block the visual attack. "God knows, if you watch too many horrible performances on stage, you will have nightmares at night." Backstage, little Sheldon, who took off his performance clothes, also saw the eye-catching performance on stage in the best viewing area. Then, he was disgusted and immediately gave up his dream of becoming an actor. Another week passed, and little Sheldon, who had lost his direction in life again, recently became obsessed with replying to pen pals. And this time, he was also lucky to meet a pen pal named John. The two became good friends through frequent correspondence. You know, it's not easy to be a friend of little Sheldon, at least the other party must be smart enough. After little Sheldon told his troubles, John enthusiastically invited him to attend his lecture. It was also at this time that little Sheldon learned that John, who had been keeping in touch with him through letters, was a professor at a local university in Texas. It was Friday this week. After the morning cultural class was over, Sheldon called Mike and said, "Mike, are you interested in going to the university lecture with me?" Obviously, according to Sheldon, Mike had already finished his high school courses, and staying in school was just a waste of time. Of course, he invited Mike to study at the university for another reason. Sheldon, who was not used to going to an unfamiliar environment, felt more at ease when accompanied by acquaintances. On the other hand, Mike, who was about to have lunch with Katie and several other girls, heard Sheldon's invitation and realized that the opportunity to increase his IQ had come. Mike's current physique has passed the Moonlight feature and is about to break through the 300 mark. As for intelligence, it has remained at more than 160 for a long time. Although it is not obvious at ordinary times, Mike can keenly feel that he is still far behind Sheldon in terms of IQ. To solve this problem, we need to find more high IQ talents. And as far as Mike knows, when Sheldon goes to the university as an auditor, he will meet another top genius. Peggy, who has an IQ of over 190, also has a high IQ. She can definitely be regarded as the enemy of life of little Sheldon. Therefore, in order to better improve his intelligence, Mike turned down the arrangement to have lunch with Katie and other girls. So he came to the school gate with little Sheldon and waited for Grandma Connie's private car. Because it was Friday, George had to work at the sporting goods store and couldn't get away. So the task of picking up little Sheldon fell on Grandma Connie. "Hey, Mike. Are you going to the University of Texas as an auditor too?" Grandma Connie, with wet hair and a swimming cap beside her, was obviously just pulled over from the swimming pool. Knowing what her little grandson was going to do, she was a little surprised to see Mike here. "Yes, I have already graduated from the Olympiad class," Mike said jokingly. This is indeed the case. Mike is staying in school now. In addition to being able to communicate better with the girls, there is actually nothing to do. "I understand. Please get in the car." "Two little geniuses," Grandma Connie said with a smile. There was already a little genius in the family, so Grandma Connie had some understanding of Mike's current situation. Geniuses, it's normal for them to have some strange behaviors. Then, during the more than an hour that the students were enjoying lunch, Grandma Connie drove and successfully sent Mike and the others to the gate of the University of Texas. Little Sheldon, who knew Professor John's lecture classroom from the letter, led the two behind him to the destination. I won't go in. Although Grandma Connie is usually carefree, she is still a little restrained when she comes to a solemn place like a university. After leaving Grandma Connie, who insisted on staying outside, Mike and little Sheldon entered the university classroom together. It was not long before class time, and the university classroom was full of students. When a little kid like little Sheldon entered the classroom, he instantly caused a discussion among the college students sitting there. Facing the surprised eyes of the college students, little Sheldon seemed very calm at this time, and even enjoyed this feeling. After looking around the classroom, he walked to the middle of the first row with a little pride and took the best study position. A perfect version in 169, one book bar. On the other side, when the handsome Mike followed into the classroom, it caused a burst of exclamations from the female college students. Fortunately, Mike had seen this situation many times, so he naturally behaved very calmly. Then, he also went to the first row and sat next to little Sheldon. Not long after that, he had several more small notes in his hand. It must be said that college life is very good, and college girls are also very brave. Mike looked around and found that there were no female classmates with very bright looks, so he quietly stuffed the small note with lipstick marks in his hand into the drawer. Seeing that the attempt to flirt with Mike was about to fail, some female classmates were preparing to launch a second attack. A little old man who was only about 1.6 meters tall and half bald on his head walked in with Grandma Connie. Looking at the shy expression on Grandma Connie's face with a smile, it was obvious that something had happened in the corridor before. "Connie, please sit down." Professor John led Connie's grandmother to the first row in a gentlemanly manner. "Thank you." Connie's grandmother smiled reservedly. Then, under the surprised look of little Sheldon, she sat on the other side of him. Before, Connie's grandmother was determined not to enter the university classroom. Now her behavior is very suspicious. But soon, little Sheldon didn't have time to think about it, because his pen pal John had already turned his attention to him. "I'm John, you must be Sheldon." Professor John smiled and said, "You are indeed a little genius. Sometimes it is more effective to praise someone's family than to praise him directly." Professor John, who knew this well, kept paying attention to Connie's grandmother out of the corner of his eye. After seeing the smile on the other person's face become brighter, he also smiled knowingly. "Yes, I'm Sheldon. Nice to meet you, Professor John." Little Sheldon nodded and greeted the other person seriously. Professor John, with a kind smile, chatted with little Sheldon for a while, and then his eyes turned to the handsome Mike next to him. "New classmate, are you also a family member of Connie?" Professor John asked with a smile. Obviously, he also saw that Mike had a special relationship with Connie's grandma. "My name is Mike, and I'm staying at Connie's grandma's house now," Mike said truthfully. "Oh, is that so? Welcome, Mike." Although Professor John was talking to Mike, his eyes were always on Connie's grandma. Obviously, Professor John was fascinated by Connie's grandma. Chapter 146, Relationship Progress. When Professor John got on the podium and was about to give his lecture, Sheldon turned to look at Grandma Connie in confusion and asked, "Grandma, have you known Professor John before? Why do I feel that you have a very close relationship?" Thinking about the performance of Grandma Connie and Professor John before, Sheldon found a very appropriate adjective. "You are still young, you shouldn't care about these things. Listen to the class carefully," Grandma Connie answered in a concealing way. At the same time, her eyes intentionally or unintentionally looked at Professor John, who was sorting out the preparation documents on the podium. Obviously, Grandma Connie also had some interest in Professor John. In fact, the two did not know each other before, but just now in the corridor, Professor John approached her in a gentlemanly manner, which made a very good impression on Grandma Connie. As for Professor John, because of his smart brain, he has always been very successful in study and work. However, in terms of feelings, because of his too rational personality and not good at communicating with ladies, he has never enjoyed the taste of love. Professor John, who thought he would die alone, was attracted by the charm of Grandma Connie when he saw her for the first time. This also shows that love knows no age. Next, Professor John, who was attracted to the other party physically and mentally, would always look at Grandma Connie unconsciously during the lecture. This behavior greatly affected the quality of his lectures, which made little Sheldon very dissatisfied. He looked back and forth between Professor John and Grandma Connie for several times, and seemed to understand something. Then, little Sheldon whispered to Grandma Connie, "Grandma, can you leave the classroom first?" "Why? I think college classes are quite interesting." Grandma Connie has a rich emotional experience, but she has never met a big boy as innocent as Professor John, which makes her feel very novel. However, when she turned around and saw the dissatisfied look of her little grandson, she understood what the other party meant after a little thought, realizing that staying here did affect Professor John's lectures. So Grandma Connie took advantage of the other party writing on the blackboard and half crouched and quietly slipped out of the classroom from the front door. When Professor John finished writing on the blackboard and looked back, he found that there was no trace of Grandma Connie, which made him absent-minded for a moment. However, as a qualified university professor, Professor John quickly returned to normal. Next, without the disturbance of Grandma Connie, the teaching process became smooth. After more than 2 hours of teaching, Professor John once again met Grandma Connie, who came in to pick up Sheldon and his wife. After some ideological struggle, Professor John boldly took the initiative to chat with Grandma Connie again. On the other hand, Sheldon, who had a satisfactory university physics course, also found that he had found a new goal in life. He wanted to learn more physics knowledge. In this case, Sheldon liked John, the knowledgeable physics professor, more and more. "Mike, what do you think of Professor John?" A magical idea came to Sheldon's mind. He wanted to match John and Connie. If the two of them became, not only would Sheldon be able to learn physics knowledge more conveniently, but the Cooper family would also have one more smart person. In Sheldon's view, more smart people in the family might change the stupid genes of the Cooper family. So, in a way, Sheldon was also worried about his family. Professor John is a nice guy, but I think Grandma Connie can handle her own affairs, Mike said with a smile, holding 2 intelligence attribute +1 light balls in his hands. That's right, when Professor John chose to approach Grandma Connie, a light ball with the main attribute of intelligence burst out from his body. So, Mike also had a good impression of him. However, Mike did not intend to intervene too deeply in Grandma Connie's personal emotional issues. After all, emotions are very personal and mysterious, so just let it go. Moreover, Grandma Connie is an old hand in emotions, and she must know what she needs better than anyone else. On the way back, Grandma Connie seemed to be in a very good mood. "Grandma, what do you think of Professor John?" Little Sheldon has not given up the idea of bringing John and Connie together. "John, very gentlemanly and interesting," Grandma Connie replied. Thinking of John's clumsy look when he asked her for contact information, Grandma Connie couldn't help but smile. "Then what do you think? Let Professor John join our family?" Little Sheldon took the opportunity to ask. "Join our family?" Grandma Connie was stunned for a moment, and then she understood her grandson's intention. Then she said, "We have only known John for a short time, and it is too early to discuss this issue now. Let's observe for a while." Although Grandma Connie did not give a clear answer, looking at her current appearance, Professor John will definitely have a chance if he takes the initiative. Check out the correct version in 16191 book 1 bar. The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone on the earth, an old man riding a bicycle came to Grandma Connie's door. Yes, Professor John, who had found Grandma Connie's home address, could not help missing her, and took the initiative to visit her during the weekend break. Because he found out that Grandma Connie was very interested in Chinese food, Professor John brought a cooking pot and various Chinese seasonings. Professor John, who had been to China for academic exchanges, also had a deep study of the food culture there. "Oh, why are you here, John?" Grandma Connie opened the door and saw the visitor with a surprised expression on her face. "I heard that you like Chinese food, so I plan to show you my cooking skills today." Professor John pointed to the cooking pot on his back and said with a smile, "Actually, you don't need to bring cooking tools. I have them at home." Grandma Connie smiled and shook her head. Although Professor John now looks a little funny with a black pot on his back, Grandma Connie still felt his sincerity. Moreover, because Mike would cook some small stir-fry dishes from time to time, there was a ready-made cooking pot at home. Really? That's great. Professor John did not think there was anything wrong with his current image. On the contrary, he looked very happy because he had a common topic with Grandma Connie. When Mike got up, he saw the two old people busy in the kitchen. "Mike, you're up. Go wash up quickly, and you can try the Sichuan spicy chicken that John made for us later." Grandma Connie greeted with a smile. At this time, Professor John, who was busy cutting chicken in the kitchen, also took the time to stick his head out and greeted. "Mike, I heard from Connie that you are also very knowledgeable about Chinese food. We can communicate when we are free." "Okay, Professor John." Mike was not very surprised by Professor John's arrival. After all, judging from his performance yesterday, he was obviously fascinated by Grandma Connie. Then, after Mike finished washing up, he saw that the two elderly people were still playing happily in the kitchen. "As for the Sichuan spicy chicken, I'm afraid I have to wait until noon to see if I can eat it. After all, it is a big dish." "Grandma Connie, I have an appointment today, so I'll leave first." "I wish you a good time." Mike did not plan to continue staying at home as a light bulb. Chapter 147 Two Boats. What a pity. John's dishes are about to start cooking. Grandma Connie seemed to want to keep Mike. But after seeing the teasing smile on the other's face, Grandma Connie also smiled and said, "Okay, I wish you a happy weekend." After the two of them waved their hands tacitly, Mike left the house. Today, the Devil Body group will hold a family party at Karen's house, and Mike can just go over to accompany them. After all, at school yesterday, Mike refused to have lunch with the girls, and he still needs to comfort them. Not long after Mike left the house, he saw little Sheldon from the opposite door appear at the door and waved to him. "What's wrong, Sheldon?" Mike looked at the mysterious look on the other side and asked with a smile. "Did Professor John go to Grandma's house?" Little Sheldon asked anxiously. The scene of Professor John entering Grandma Connie's house was just seen by little Sheldon, who got up and brushed his teeth. After discovering this important information, little Sheldon has been standing in front of his window, staring at the situation opposite. "Well, Professor John is making spicy chicken for Connie." Mike explained the situation at home. Little Sheldon was not interested in spicy chicken and asked mysteriously, "How far have they come?" As he spoke, little Sheldon looked expectant again. He really hoped that John could get along well with Connie's grandmother. "I know what you are thinking." Mike smiled and shook his head, and then reminded, "It is better to let things take their own course for such things." Seeing that little Sheldon seemed to be lost in thought, Mike did not say anything more, turned around and walked towards Karen's house. Because there is a food factory at home, Karen's parents usually have a lot of work to do, and they rarely stay at home even on weekends. So the huge villa has become a paradise for the girls and Mike. In the evening, Mike, who had played for a day, was driven back to the doorstep by Regina. After watching Regina leave, Mike looked at little Sheldon in front of him and asked, "What's the matter?" Little Sheldon seemed to have been waiting here for a day. "I've observed for a day that Professor John has never left Grandma Connie's house. I don't know what their relationship is like now." Little Sheldon expressed his doubts. Little Sheldon is obviously very concerned and determined about bringing John and Grandma Connie together. "You are so curious, why don't you go in and take a look yourself?" Mike asked. "I'm afraid to disturb them," little Sheldon replied shyly. It seems that he is not completely ignorant of the ways of the world. Then, after repeated requests from little Sheldon, Mike reluctantly agreed to help him find out information about Grandma Connie and Professor John. At home, the two were sitting leisurely on the sofa, tasting the tea brought by John and chatting. They looked very harmonious. "Mike, you are back. Did you have a good time today?" Grandma Connie greeted Mike enthusiastically when she saw him coming back. Then, she happily shared, "You know, John knows a lot of interesting knowledge. He even knows all the types of peppers." Professor John traveled to many countries when he was young, so his knowledge and vision were naturally very broad. In addition, with his deliberate flattery, he made Grandma Connie feel very happy throughout the day. Hearing Grandma Connie's praise, Professor John also showed a satisfied smile on his face. Then he looked at Mike and said with interest, "I heard from Connie that the sweet and sour pork and mushy pork you made are delicious. Can you tell me the trick?" John has been to many countries, among which he has a strong liking for the vast land and rich resources and prosperous culture in all aspects of the country. He even learned a set of health-preserving boxing for the elderly from there. In fact, there is no trick. People in different regions naturally have different taste needs. And according to the different situations of each person, the choice of taste is also different. Mike briefly talked about his understanding of controlling taste. For example, people who often engage in physical activities tend to have a heavy taste, more salt or spicy food because of sweating. On the contrary, people who use their brains more often like sweets. Well, in fact, this theory is not very accurate. After all, the development of personal eating habits is a very long process and will be affected by many factors. However, Professor John was very interested in the dietary theory that Mike casually proposed. Then, he discussed with Mike about people's choice of taste in different climates. Looking at Professor John, who was learning from his experience and studying the problem seriously, Grandma Connie smiled again. Yes, after this day's contact, Grandma Connie has also been attracted to Professor John. In her opinion, a serious and knowledgeable person is very attractive. Just then, the phone at home suddenly rang. A correct version of the book bar in 1619. It should be Shelley who called. He has called several times today. Grandma Connie said speechlessly and funny. Although little Sheldon did not come directly to disturb the date of the two old people throughout the day. But he still wanted to know the progress of the two by calling. However, for the little grandson's euphemistic way of asking, Grandma Connie did not understand the other party's intention, and she even thought that the other party was playing a prank. "I'll go answer it." Mike did not forget that he promised little Sheldon to help him get intelligence. "Hello Connie, are you free tomorrow?" The call was connected, and a rough voice came out of the receiver. "Are you, Mr. Ella?" Mike felt that the other party's voice was very familiar. Grandma Connie has a free and easy personality, and she was also a great beauty when she was young. Even now that she is old, her charm is still undiminished. Therefore, until now, she is still very popular with old men, and as far as Mike knows, this Mr. Ella is one of Grandma Connie's sweeters. "I'm Ella, you are Mike, right? Connie often mentions you." After a few polite words, Jeff asked again, "Excuse me, is Connie at home?" Mike turned his head and looked at Grandma Connie, who was happily chatting with Professor John, and said, "She may not be free now." "Okay, I'll call her when she is free later." Jeff hung up the phone tactfully. "Is it Shelley who called? I don't know what happened to him today." Grandma Connie asked casually after seeing Mike finish the call. "The person who just called was Mr. Ella." Mike said truthfully, "It's just that Professor John is here, so he didn't mention anything specific." "Ella? What's the matter with him?" Grandma Connie was surprised for a moment, and then she looked at Professor John sitting next to her with a guilty look. Mike smiled and didn't say anything. Professor John saw that Mike had something to say to Grandma Connie alone. Besides, it was getting late, so Professor John stood up and said goodbye. "I had a great time today. Connie, thank you for your hospitality. I have to go now." After that, Professor John nodded to Mike again, put on his cooking pot and walked out. As soon as Professor John went out, Grandma Connie asked, "Mike, what's the matter with the phone call just now?" "Mr. Ella wants to make an appointment with you tomorrow," Mike said. "Okay." Grandma Connie showed a distressed look and then chased out the door. After watching Professor John riding away on his bicycle, she walked back slowly with a heavy look on her face. Chapter 148, Magical Brain Circuits. On one side is the lovely, funny, and knowledgeable John, and on the other side is the strong, affectionate, and energetic Ella. Both of them gave Grandma Connie a good impression. "Mike, what do you think I should choose?" Grandma Connie asked, after returning to the house. Although Grandma Connie has rich emotional experience, she still lost her sense of proportion when the time came. After all, feelings are sometimes so complicated. "Are you talking about Mr. Ella and Professor John?" Mike rarely saw Grandma Connie worrying, so he expressed his thoughts. "I think just follow your heart, or you can learn from me." Grandma Connie had already figured out Mike's private life, so he didn't pretend. On the other side, Grandma Connie, who was waiting for Mike to have some good suggestions, heard the other party's shameless remarks, shook her head in disgust, and went aside. She really needs to calm down now. But Mike was right about one thing. At Grandma Connie's age, she no longer has so many requirements for material conditions. She is indeed qualified to follow her heart and seek purer happiness. In Grandma Connie's heart, Ella made her feel like a strong bear, while John made her feel like a cute little potato. If she were 20 years younger, Grandma Connie might choose the strong bear, but now she prefers the little potato. Thinking of the scenes of getting along with Professor John, Grandma Connie couldn't help but smile. Yes, who can refuse a cute little potato? So far, Grandma Connie's heart gave her clear guidance. With her decision, she became cheerful. Just then, the phone at home rang again. "What's the matter, Ella? Invite me to the restaurant for dinner tomorrow." "Okay, see you tomorrow." Grandma Connie was not a little girl after all. Since she had made a choice in her heart, she decided to explain the situation to Ella. And tomorrow is a good opportunity. The next day, Grandma Connie, who felt a little guilty, used the lunchtime to patiently accompany Ella to finish a big meal. Until the way to drive Grandma Connie home, Ella had a happy smile on her face. Grandma Connie's performance today made him feel that his happiness was coming. So, Ella took the opportunity to say, "Connie, we are not young anymore. If you are willing." Just when Ella was about to confess his true feelings, Grandma Connie interrupted him. "Ella, you may have misunderstood." Grandma Connie confessed, "I already have someone I like. Don't come to me in the future." While rejecting Ella, Grandma Connie thought of the lovely Professor John again, and a sweet smile unconsciously appeared on the corner of her mouth. However, this was too cruel for Mr. Ella, who was about to confess. After hearing the bad news, he was stunned for a moment, and his expression became sad. "We went bowling together, watched movies together. I thought you understood my heart." Ella told about the happy experiences he had with Grandma Connie, and thought about the fact that he was about to lose her. He couldn't control his emotions for a while, and he burst into tears like a child. Grandma Connie thought that the matter was over, but she still underestimated Ella's determination. That afternoon, a team of delivery men drove to the door of Grandma Connie's house. "Excuse me, is this Connie's house?" the delivery man asked. "It's me, but I don't remember buying anything," Grandma Connie said in surprise. Watching the expensive new furniture being unloaded from the car, Grandma Connie seemed to understand something. "Wait a minute, these things are not mine. Please send them back to Ella." Grandma Connie is not a person who takes advantage of others. Moreover, she and Ella have nothing to do, and she can't accept the other party's kindness. "Sorry, we are only responsible for delivery." The deliveryman was still unloading the furniture from the car. Roughly estimated that the value of these furniture may exceed 10,000 yuan. Grandma Connie couldn't sit still. She immediately called Ella. "Ella, what do you mean?" After the call was connected, Grandma Connie questioned. "Connie, I know you don't like me, but you can't stop me from liking you." After Ella made a very manly speech, he hung up the phone. "Hello. Hello." Listening to the busy tone on the phone, Grandma Connie was both amused and angry by Ella's behavior. But one thing is certain, Ella's behavior did not win back Grandma Connie's heart. In the following weekend, Grandma Connie, who understood what she wanted, developed a rapid relationship with Professor John. With mutual interest, the two took the opportunity of Mike leaving home again and finally took the relationship to the last step. Satisfied, Professor John also discovered the new furniture in Grandma Connie's house during his break. "Connie, your new furniture is very good," Professor John praised. A perfect version of the book in 16:9. Grandma Connie's face was very complicated for John's praise. After some entanglement, she told the other party the situation truthfully. "I thought such a thing would make Professor John angry, but he smiled and said, 'It's very interesting. Someone is competing with me, which makes me more excited.'" Professor John, who was experiencing love for the first time, turned around the room a few times and asked with interest, "Connie, can you give me the other party's contact information? I want to contact him." Strictly speaking, Professor John is also a genius in terms of IQ. The ideas of geniuses are sometimes confusing. That afternoon, Professor John followed the address given by Connie's grandmother and found Mr. Rella's furniture store. Are you here to demonstrate to me? Ella saw Professor John enter the store and looked very ugly. No, I just want to know more about Connor's previous life, Professor John said with a smile. Then, under Ella's angry expression, Professor John was very nervous and looked at the furniture in the store on his own. This recliner is very good. Professor John finally stopped in front of a recliner and his expression looked a little surprised. Ella, who thought the other party was here to demonstrate, saw that the other party talked about his professional field and then he became interested. Of course, this is from the hands of a master, Ella introduced. Then, the two men started with the problem of chairs, and they got along better and better, and finally drank beer in the store. In the end, Professor John bought the recliner as he wished. After a conversation, Ella also felt that Professor John was a good person. But before parting, Ella still said something harsh. Don't think I will give up Connie just like this. I accept your challenge. Professor John smiled and then acted like a medieval man accepting a duel. In fact, after a pleasant chat, Professor John also felt that the other person was a good person. Until the evening, when Professor John returned home, he couldn't help but call Connie's grandmother and told her everything about how he became friends with Ella. Professor John wanted to get praise from the other party, but he was scolded by Connie's grandmother. In Connie's grandmother's opinion, the childish behavior of the two men made her a little embarrassed. On the other side, Professor John made a big mistake, but didn't know it. Chapter 149 Peggy. It was Friday afternoon again, and Mike accompanied little Sheldon to the gate of the University of Texas again. Including this time, Mike has been here 3 times. Although he can learn a lot of useful physics knowledge in the university courses, Mike is not happy at all, just because the person he is waiting for has not shown up in the first 2 times. This made Mike consider whether he should take the initiative to find the other party in private. After all, the leaks with an IQ of more than 190 should not be less abundant than little Sheldon. Mike, what is the situation between Grandma Connie and Professor John? On the way to the classroom, little Sheldon, who didn't know that he was treated as a leak, asked with concern. The study of the previous 2 university courses has made little Sheldon gain a lot, so he hopes that this situation will continue. According to my observation, their relationship should be going smoothly, Mike said truthfully. Recently, Mike discovered a subtle thing. Grandma Connie's complexion is getting better and better. It is not difficult to guess from this situation that her relationship with Professor John may have made great progress. Really? Little Sheldon seemed very happy to hear the news. After all, in his cognition, if Grandma Connie can have a close relationship with Professor John, then he can stay in the University of Texas to study better. This is probably a disguised tactic of selling Grandma. So when do you think Professor John will propose to Grandma Connie? While entering the university classroom, Sheldon was still asking questions that he cared about. However, his conversation this time did not get a response. Mike Sheldon found that Mike was distracted during the chat, and his expression was a little dissatisfied. When he followed the other person's gaze and looked into the classroom, he frowned even more. In the middle of the first row of the classroom, there was a little girl taking a textbook out of her pink school bag. The seat where she sat was exactly where Sheldon had sat the last 2 times. And from this little girl, Sheldon seemed to see his own shadow, and this feeling made him very dislike. Compared with Sheldon's unhappiness, Mike on the other side showed a satisfied smile on his face. Finally found you, Peggy. Yes, the little girl sitting in the middle of the first row at this moment is Peggy. When little Sheldon saw his familiar seat was occupied, he seemed to have met his natural enemy. In order to get his seat back, little Sheldon hurriedly walked to Peggy and glared at her, trying to get her to give up her seat. However, his behavior obviously had no effect on Peggy. After the little girl put her textbooks on the table in an orderly manner, she looked up at little Sheldon in front of her, and then her eyes shifted to Mike, who came with her. Mike was wearing a simple white t-shirt today, but he still looked very handsome. In order to get the little girl's attention back and continue with his plan, little Sheldon took the initiative to say hello. Hello, Peggy, who found herself distracted, also turned her eyes back to look at little Sheldon and responded, "Hi, who are you?" Little Sheldon adopted a roundabout tactic. "I'm Peggy." At this time, Peggy was still distressed because of her super high IQ and couldn't make friends. Seeing that little Sheldon took the initiative to talk, she politely praised, "Your bow tie is very beautiful." Yes, little Sheldon's outfit today is still the same as usual, a well-fitting small plaid shirt with a small bow tie. "Thank you." The other party's compliment caught little Sheldon off guard, but he quickly adjusted his state and said cryptically, "Peggy, you look very young. Are you here with an adult who is in class?" The meaning of his words is very clear, probably wanting the other party to find their parents so as to give up their seats. On the other side, Peggy felt the hostility of little Sheldon. At the same time, she, with an IQ of more than 190, quickly realized the other party's intention. "No, Professor John listened to my research on quantum chromodynamics at high temperature and specially invited me to come here as an auditor." Peggy did not intend to give up her seat and even showed a provocative smile on her face. Really? Little Sheldon did not expect that the little girl opposite him would actually have academic research. Yes, Professor John is super nice. Seeing little Sheldon was frustrated, Peggy's smile on her face became brighter. At this point, in the first round of the confrontation between the two super geniuses, Peggy had an absolute upper hand. When Sheldon realized that something was wrong, he quickly changed the subject. "It's really interesting. I have something to explain to you. The Professor John you mentioned is my mentor and my grandma's boyfriend. He also went to Grandma Connor's house and made Chinese spicy chicken." Spicy chicken? Are the chili and chicken nuggets put together? Obviously, Peggy didn't know much about spicy chicken. However, she was very smart to make herself the questioner and take the initiative. "No, this is a very profound topic." Well, in fact, Sheldon didn't know much about cooking. So he changed the subject again and said, "In fact, I talked to Professor John about the quark model." Seeing that the other party was deliberately showing off, Peggy immediately said, "So, do you know that Professor John can use matrix control to perform golden domain byte calculations? A correct version in the 16-9 book bar." "I don't know," Sheldon replied helplessly. The physics content that Peggy talked about obviously exceeded the physics knowledge that Sheldon had learned so far. "Then do you know how to decompose under the integral symbol?" Peggy continued to ask. "I don't know," Sheldon answered helplessly again. Seeing that Sheldon was repeatedly asked, Peggy finally asked a heart-piercing question. "Then what do you know?" The embarrassed Sheldon also realized that the other party was deliberately making things difficult for him, so he said angrily, "I know, you are sitting in my seat now." "Really? That's a pity." Peggy had a triumphant smile on her face and still had no intention of giving up her seat. So far, Peggy still had the upper hand in the second round of the two super geniuses. Seeing that Sheldon was about to leave, Peggy took the initiative to ask, "How old are you?" "I'm almost 10 years old." Sheldon stopped and answered, "Me too." Peggy smiled and continued to ask, "When is your birthday?" "February 26th. Sheldon said truthfully, "I'm March 17th. Peggy said with a smile that Sheldon hated, "It's unbelievable that I'm the youngest student in this class." Peggy, who perfectly poked Sheldon's sore spot, also won in the third active confrontation. And Sheldon, who didn't take any advantage, was in a terrible mood now. He stared at Peggy, who laughed out loud in front of him, with a death stare, and went to sit on the other side of Mike in a huff. In just a few minutes, the two super geniuses who had 3 confrontations, it can be said that in order to win over each other, they all used 800 minds. On the side, Mike, who watched the big show, was almost happy. Intelligence attribute +3, intelligence attribute +2, intelligence attribute +1, intelligence attribute +1. As the light balls merged into the body, Mike's intelligence attribute directly crossed the 170 mark. It has to be said that Peggy and Sheldon are indeed super geniuses. Chapter 150 Jealousy. Seeing that Mike and Sheldon were companions, Peggy turned around and said, "Hello, hello, my name is Peggy. Hello, I'm Mike." Mike was still happy to have obtained so many intelligence attributes at once. And as far as Mike knows, Peggy is more sensible and lonely than Sheldon because of her super high emotional intelligence. In this case, it is not difficult to become friends with her. So from the perspective of wool plucking, Peggy may be more suitable than Sheldon. I know you, Mike. Peggy said, I have watched the broadcast of your football game, and your performance is super good. Thank you. Mike also praised, your hairpin is also very beautiful. Peggy was wearing a very old-fashioned red dress, and the hairpin on her head was also slightly outdated. It's just that, because the little girl is cute enough, her weird outfit looks pretty good. Thank you, you are much more polite than your friends. Hearing the compliment, Peggy smiled. It can be seen that her smile this time is much purer than before. On the other side, little Sheldon saw that Mike and Peggy were getting happier and happier. In order to express his dissatisfaction, he heavily placed the materials he brought on the table. Looking at the childish performance of little Sheldon, Mike shook his head speechlessly. In his opinion, whether in terms of IQ or EQ, little Sheldon was suppressed by Peggy, and it would be difficult for him to turn over. Just when little Sheldon was sulking, Professor John walked into the classroom with a smile. He went straight to little Sheldon and said, "Hi, Sheldon. Have you met Peggy over there?" Little Sheldon, who was still angry, said in a slightly questioning tone, "Why didn't you tell me that there would be a new auditor in this class? It seems that you already know each other." Professor John smiled indifferently and continued, "I thought this would be a surprise for you." Yes, in Professor John's opinion, two child prodigies around 10 years old should be happy to be friends. However, the shocked little Sheldon didn't think so. He retorted, "No, I don't like this kind of surprise." "Well, I don't like it either." Professor John, who had a somewhat eccentric temperament, actually understood little Sheldon's mind at this moment. "Then why did you do this?" little Sheldon asked. "Maybe, some people like this kind of surprise." Professor John looked at the little girl who was smiling brightly not far away. "Yes, I like this surprise very much," Peggy said, and looked at the handsome Mike beside her intentionally or unintentionally. Then, Mike looked at Professor John, turning his eyes to himself, so he also smiled, and said that he was happy to see Peggy here. After all, in this class, only the three of them have special identities. It seems that my decision is correct, and the success rate has reached 66%. Professor John raised his arms and celebrated for his correct decision. After that, he got a look of disgust from little Sheldon. "Okay, let's start the class." Professor John put down his arms awkwardly and walked to the podium. In the following time, Professor John was giving a lecture on the stage, while Peggy quietly picked up her notebook, leaned sideways, and asked Mike about other physics knowledge. Of course, the difficulty of the questions she asked this time was several levels lower than when she asked little Sheldon before. But as the questions they discussed became more and more difficult, and Mike was still able to answer fluently, the little girl unconsciously showed a satisfied look on her face. Obviously, as a super genius, Peggy also has her own pride. Her actions are more about testing Mike's IQ. Judging from the results, Mike basically passed her IQ test. You know, if two people with a lot of IQ differences are forced to be friends together, it will make both parties feel very tired. This situation can probably explain why little Sheldon has few friends in school. Birds of a feather flock together, and this theory is also very applicable to geniuses. Peggy was happy in class, but little Sheldon was even more depressed after discovering the little actions of the two people next to him. He felt like his friend was taken away. This feeling lasted until the end of get out of class. It was not until the bell rang that Sheldon realized that he was only angry and wasted an afternoon of precious study time. This discovery made him feel worse. "See you next Friday, Mike." At the entrance of the University of Texas, Peggy said goodbye to Mike with a smile. Then, she walked briskly towards her mother, who came to pick her up. But halfway through, she turned around again, with a mischievous smile on her face, and waved to Sheldon next to Mike. "Sheldon, I hope that, when we meet next time, you have understood what quantum chromodynamics is. Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. Knowledge of quantum mechanics is nothing great. I will catch up soon." After a proud speech, Sheldon got into Grandma Connor's car. He was almost allergic to Peggy's smile. On the other side, Mike waved to Peggy again, and got into Grandma Connor's car. In the car, after watching Peggy walk away, Grandma Connie smiled and said, "She looks very cute. Is she your new friend?" "Yes, no," Mike and little Sheldon answered at the same time. Haha, it seems that this little girl is very interesting. Grandma Connie laughed happily. In any case, she was very happy that her little grandson could meet more people of the same age. Moreover, Grandma Connie also heard Professor John mention that the new auditor girl was a very smart little prodigy. She is not my friend little Sheldon, seeing Grandma Connie's smiling face, reiterated his position. Okay, Grandma knows. Grandma Connie comforted her little grandson in a coaxing tone, and then drove home. But after walking more than half of the way, Grandma Connie noticed from the rearview mirror that her little grandson still looked unhappy. What's wrong, little cookie? Is there anything unhappy? Grandma Connie asked. Nothing. I'm just experiencing some emotions that I'm not familiar with, little Sheldon said, and deliberately glanced at Mike, who was sitting next to him. There was a hint of resentment in his eyes, as if he was accusing Mike of betraying him. Seeing this situation, Grandma Connie realized that something must have happened in today's college class. So she asked, Mike, do you know what happened to Shelley? Maybe Sheldon was jealous because he found out that there was another peer who was smarter than him. Mike analyzed. No, I'm not jealous. She's not smarter than me. Little Sheldon immediately refuted, and then explained. She just knows a little more than I do, just like you, Mike. Although you have a wide range of knowledge, I'm sure you're not as smart as me. Well, little Sheldon, who was in a bad mood, is now full of aggression. Mike was accidentally injured. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.